call that. Katie, we'll come back to you in Washington. Thanks for that. You're looking there at the floor of the House of Commons, the West Block to be exact. A packed place, a packed chamber right now. Obviously, a lot more seats have been added. Normally, you'd have 338. That's how many MPs are there. Some have been added to the middle, and the galleries, which I will admit do not fill up for question period, are also brimming with special guests and dignitaries and some Canadians. The government wanted to highlight the nature of Canada and the United States' relationship on the economy, so there are representatives from different companies, manufacturers, and others. And so you'll see that certainly highlighted in some of what we hear this afternoon in order to, I think, put the spotlight on how important that trade relationship is, in spite of some of those irritants that we've been talking around electric vehicles and other things. So this should be getting underway soon. We're now about 20 minutes late or so, which, is not bad for a presidential visit or even a prime ministerial visit, frankly. Security also has been a big factor. So many of these people that are in the room had to arrive an awfully long time ago and are probably getting a little bit antsy to hear things as well. We're hearing there's about 2 minutes until we get inside that chamber. Hannah, maybe I'll just go back to you quickly to get a sense of the atmosphere. Everyone looks pretty happy to be there and kind of excited because it is a special moment.
Yeah, let me give you a little sense of what it is like here on the ground in the foyer of the House of Commons. Right behind me is the door where we just saw Antony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, go in only a few moments ago. And I mean, hey, I did try to stop him, but it was just like, no, he's going in there and welcome to Canada. He seemed all happy about that. But it is a different feel up here on Parliament Hill, and even talking to security, you can see security running around right now as well, because you can tell that this is about to begin. Everything's getting a lot tighter. People are sitting in the seats, but the overall feel for it is just like, wow, what a breath of fresh air. And I even hear them laughing in the chamber right now. Not sure what it is because I'm not in the chamber, but there is this feel of camaraderie, of look, these two countries work together, and they work together well.
Hannah, that's excellent timing. Things are about to get underway here, I believe, for the official arrival of everybody. We'll listen into this and pop back in when we need to give you some analysis and updates on events. Let's listen in live.
I always hate to be the bearer of bad news, but this is your 5-minute warning. Mesdames et Messieurs, bienvenue aux Chambres des Communes. Welcome to the House of Commons. It's our pleasure, of course, to have you here today. It's going to be about 5 minutes, so when I come up for the next one, I will make sure that everyone is quiet so we can have our guests join us and address us. The other warning that I'm going to give you is that once the procession, the party leaves, I'm going to want all of you to stay in your seats for about 3-4 minutes afterwards, and I'll give you the go when it's time to leave the chamber once our party leaves. So, merci beaucoup, bienvenue une autre fois, et j'espère que vous allez. Well, I'll say it this way: I hope you guys all take care of yourselves. Merci beaucoup.
Okay, false alarm, as is often the case with political events. We've got about another 5 minutes to go. I believe that was the Sergeant of Arms, I'm going to say, who was just telling people to sit tight in their seats and wait for events to get underway. The President has already met with the Prime Minister a number of times now, privately, both last night at the Prime Minister's home, in his office, and then around the cabinet table with their team. So there's been lots of time for the two leaders to talk privately and discuss some of the issues we'll hear more about in these speeches. And then later this afternoon at the press conference. We'll keep our eyes on the House, but we'll bring back at least David's voice to talk a little bit more about what we're expected to hear. There's people waving. There's Melanie Joly waving to people in the gallery. Now, I will say that there were a lot of conversations between Melanie Joly and Sean Fraser, the Minister of Immigration, who was recently in Washington, around this issue of Roxham Road. And I think there was some surprise on the Canadian part, at least from my perspective, that they were going to get anything, that this has turned into something. So I would guess here that these ministers are waving at the Michaels, that Michael Spavor and Michael Kofrig. That would be my guess.
Yes, Minister Champagne appears to be going into prayer and genuflection, so
Yeah.
I'm not sure what is happening there. And Rosie, that was Chris D'Entremont.
Oh, yeah, there we go. We'll just be quiet for a second. Thanks, Dave. Well, that was quite a moment and quite unexpected, and I'm sure quite surprising for these two gentlemen who have tried to live quite privately since they've returned to Canada just after the last election.
Rosie, the president can be another 5 minutes if you can see a moment like that, right?
Yeah, that's right.
You know, after 1,019 days in essentially solitary detention inside a Chinese prisons for both of these men, for doing nothing except being Canadian citizens in the country at a time when a high-profile and highly controversial extradition case was playing out in a Vancouver court as U.S. Justice sought the chief financial officer of Huawei, Meng Wanzhou, on charges of bank fraud that led to violations of U.S. sanctions against Iran. And that was a domino effect that went into place that led to their detention, their incarceration, and eventually their dramatic and historic release after more than 1,000 days in prison. And to see them there celebrated by everybody in Parliament is quite the moment, given everything they've gone through. And as you rightly point out, they have live very private lives because, as you can imagine, the difficulty and the torment that they went through this time just has a profound effect on your life, and it's got to be tough to put the pieces back together after all of that.
Yeah, and frankly, if you want a demonstration of how the two countries can work together to bring about something good, you need not look further than those two gentlemen. Okay, we are about 3 minutes away from the events getting started, a little delayed as expected during moments like this. And I forget, honestly, we were talking about Roxham Road, I think, David.
I think so. Yeah.
And how I think even Canadians were a little surprised that they got this progress, because it has been months, if not years, that they've been trying to come up with a solution for this. And there has been an intense amount of pressure by the Quebec Premier, François Legault, who has taken the brunt of the people coming to his province, and then subsequently, of course, from the Conservative Party, calling for some sort of immediate change. So an announcement on this is significant, I think, for the country and certainly for the Prime Minister and his government.
Yeah, it certainly was. And Rosie, just to correct the record, that was Chris D'Entremont earlier telling people of the delay. He's the MP for West Nova and the Deputy Speaker of the House. Yes. Look, he's a good Atlantic Canadian guy. Got to give him his props.
Apologies, yeah.
But look, the Roxham Road has been a persistent, difficult issue for the Liberals in Quebec, largely because obviously that is the funnel point and that is the focus point. And when the Premier of Quebec went public recently saying, look, we're at capacity. We cannot handle any more people coming in. Our schools are on bust. We have nowhere to put them. We cannot provide social services to the people who are coming into the country. It was a compelling argument that the burden had because this had become essentially a funnel point, that the burden was falling entirely on one province. And I remember going there in 2017, I think it was, or maybe 2018, when the numbers were smaller, and spending a night at Roxham Road, and we had this great camera access, and there's hundreds of people, and at the time, a lot of them Haitian and Nigerian, people who were afraid of losing their temporary protected status in the United States and being deported back to Haiti, were fleeing to Canada, in large part because they were worried about Donald Trump and his immigration policies. And over the years, this unofficial border crossing built up infrastructure. It was a dirt road with a ditch and a pop-up canvas tent when this started. And now it's a paved road with electricity running down there, with generators, with washroom facilities and permanent buildings built to deal with the whole thing. It has essentially become, in everything but name, an official border crossing. But when 39,000 people crossed there last year, it became too much for the Quebec system to bear, and they asked for change, and now they're going to get it.
Since you're all sitting,
Okay, David,
thank you so
thanks for
much.
that.
Merci
I
beaucoup
think
pour
this
votre
is actually going to
Ladies and
happen now.
gentlemen,
Let's.
just, please wait a few more moments, and we'll have our special guest join us. Merci beaucoup une autre fois. I know.
I'm not sure I do believe him, but he says it's just a few moments now that we'll have the official arrival of the Speaker of the House, Speaker of the Senate, President, Prime Minister, and others. I will say that I did also see Jagmeet Singh there in his seat inside the House of Commons with his wife and their baby girl. So probably the smallest, the youngest member in attendance for this address by the President to Canada's Parliament and to Canada. Just standing by in a few moments, this will get underway. About 30 minutes at this stage, late. And I only mention that because there's a very coordinated schedule of events that has to unfold here, including, of course, the press conference that's across the street later. And then a lot of the people in this room are invited to this gala dinner that gets underway later, and they have to be on buses at a certain time to get to the Aviation Museum, which is quite a ways away from where we are, and so security concerns probably want everyone to.
But Rosie, a president is never late. A president arrives exactly when he intends or she intends to arrive, and that's the situation we're waiting. And now look, you know, one issue we haven't touched on that I know is probably going to be featured prominently in both of the leaders' comments is Ukraine. Right? I mean, the U.S. is driving the show in terms of military and financial aid for President Zelensky and the defense of his country against Vladimir Putin's invasion that is well over a year old now. Canada, while not able to provide anything close to that level of military support, has provided financial support and taken in refugees into this country. They are both shared in finishing the job of the defense and protection of Ukraine, even though U.S. politics is shifting in a different direction down there now, certainly in the Republican primary side. Now, that's Speaker Anthony Rota. Once he's there, that's probably the starter's pistol, Rosie.
Yeah, that's well, we'll see, because we've been fooled a couple times. But yeah, here we go. Here we go. All right. The President, his wife, Sophie Gregoire Trudeau, and the Prime Minister entering the chambers now. They'll take their seats, and events will get underway.
Mr. President, Dr. Biden, welcome to Canada in the House of Commons. Monsieur le Premier ministre, Monsieur le Président Fury, Mesdames et Messieurs, les chefs de parti, Mesdames et Messieurs,
party leaders, members of Parliament, Your Excellencies, guests, allow me to welcome you to this very special event.
On behalf of my colleagues, we are honored by your visit. As we come together under one roof, we take a moment to celebrate the friendship and the shared values of our countries. We celebrate our people and the history of cooperation between Canada and the United States.
A prime example of this cooperation can be seen in my hometown, North Bay. in the riding of Nipissing-Temiskaming, where Canadian and American military personnel work side by side at NORAD to ensure our safety by patrolling the skies of North America. NORAD is proof that when Canadians and Americans venture to undertake a mission together, we accomplish great things, but more importantly, our great friendship grows. This visit reminds us all that we must never take our friendship, this cooperation, these shared values for granted. Permettez-moi maintenant d'inviter le
I would
très
now like to
honorable
invite the Right
Premier
Honourable
Ministre.
Prime Minister to say a few words. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, we welcome to our Parliament the 46th President of the United States of America, President Joseph R. Biden, Jr. Mr. President, you are a true friend to Canada, and that matters more than ever in this consequential moment. Make no mistake, these are serious times. When the consequences of a warming planet are intersecting with the aftermath of a global pandemic, when an unjustifiable war in Europe has shocked the conscience of the world and exposed the vulnerability of energy markets and supply chains, when families are facing the pressures of inflation and struggling with affordability, when citizens around the world feel anxious about their future and their kids' futures. Mr. President, as it should be, our two nations stand united in this moment, finding solutions side by side. On va continuer.
We will continue to work together to create jobs and to build economies and societies that are healthier and more sustainable. The economy, the environment, and security are interwoven, and that has never been more clear.
It has never been more clear that everything is interwoven. Economic policy is climate policy, is security policy. People need us to think strategically and act with urgency. And that is exactly what brings us together today. Mr. President, throughout our history, Canada and the United States, as friends and allies, have faced many challenges together. Pandemics, recessions, wars. Here in this House in September 1939, members of Parliament debated going to war. A few years later, Canadian and American soldiers were fighting against fascism shoulder to shoulder. There are battlefields around the world where our soldiers lie in cemeteries, shoulder to shoulder. War has now returned to Europe. As you well know, Mr. President, Canada will continue to stand strong with Ukraine with whatever it takes. Together, both of us are partners that Ukraine and the world can count on. Since Putin launched his brutal invasion, like you, Canada has provided significant military support, in our case, artillery, ammunition, armor, and tanks. From 2015 to today, with Operation Unifier, the Canadian Armed Forces train the brave members of the Ukrainian military, about 35,000 of them and counting. With partners and allies, we've both used sanctions and punitive economic measures to continue to deplete the Kremlin's war chest. And after a terrifying spring, a violent summer and fall, and an exhausting winter, Ukraine still stands. Il y a un an, notre ami, le président Zelensky,
1 year ago, our friend President Zelensky addressed this chamber to thank us for having supported him from the beginning. Today, Mr. President, together, we reiterate that message for President Zelensky and all Ukrainians. We remain at your side. It is by defending democracy and the rules-based international order that we will ensure the safety and security of Canadians and Americans. Vladimir Putin has underestimated the resolve of Europe and NATO allies. He has underestimated the strength and the courage of Ukrainians and their will to defend their language, their culture, and their homeland.
Mr. President, today I want to introduce you to Natalia, who I met just last week. Natalia arrived in Canada from Ukraine more than 10 years ago. Give us a wave, Natalia. Yes. She arrived in Canada from Ukraine more than 10 years ago. She's safe here with her family, but she still has a lot of loved ones in Ukraine. Every time she hangs up after speaking with a cousin or a friend, she feels a twinge in her heart, wondering if this conversation might be their last. Mr. President, we cannot and will not let Natalia's loved ones down. The Ukrainian people are counting on us. We must stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine with as much as it takes, as long as it takes. But I bring up Natalia now, not just because of what's happening over in Ukraine as we speak, but also because she's key to what we're building here today and tomorrow. Vous savez, j'ai rencontré Natalia en Nouvelle-Écosse la semaine passée.
Last week. She currently lives near Bridgewater, which is a small town of some 9,000 people. For over 50 years, the Michelin tire plant in Bridgewater has been one of the most high-performing facilities in the world. It is thanks to the strength of the workers there that Michelin has just announced major investments to modernize its facilities in order to respond to the growing demand for electric vehicles. Good, stable jobs like the ones at that plant truly count for Natalia and her family, and they also count for our large and small communities.
When I was there in Nova Scotia meeting with Natalia and others, I met third-generation tire workers at that Michelin plant. And because of the work that we're doing together and investments we're making for the future, that community will have jobs for generations more to come. And that doesn't just impact them in Bridgewater. It means there will continue to be vans delivering food to grocery stores in California and trucks delivering medical supplies to hospitals in Pennsylvania that roll on tires made in Nova Scotia, as it should be. Mr. President, in 1987, Ronald Reagan addressed this House in a final big push towards the first Canada-US Free Trade Agreement. He pointed out that the US-Canadian border was a meeting place rather than a dividing line. More than 30 years later, our border is no longer just the place where we meet each other. It's the place where we will meet the moment. It's a place where we will meet the future. A future not only with good jobs, but good, stable careers for generations to come. See, we're also joined today by steel workers from Dofasco in Hamilton. One of them is Neil. Why don't you stand up, Neil? You see, Neil's mother worked at Dofasco in the 70s. His father worked in the finishing steel area for 37 years. Now, with the investments we've made to help Dofasco phase out coal-fired steelmaking in favor of electric arc, Neil's kids and grandkids and great-grandkids will be able to choose careers making the clean steel the world needs to build EVs, buildings, and bridges. Clean steel will be the backbone for manufacturing in the future, and workers like Neil, from generations past to generations future, will continue to be at the heart of the economy we're building for the middle class. See, economic policy is climate policy, is security policy. With growing competition, including from an increasingly assertive China, there's no doubt why it matters that we turn to each other now to build up a North American market on everything from semiconductors to solar panel batteries. Mr. President, with the Inflation Reduction Act, you're creating the jobs of today and tomorrow for the middle class in America. And this also means more clients for Canadian critical minerals processors, for our clean energy innovators, for our integrated auto workers, for our farmers, growers, and producers, and so many others. It's an example of how we can make progress at home and as partners. Pour soutenir les bons emplois de l'économie de demain, le Canada a l'un des réseaux électriques les plus propres au monde. Environ 83%.
Some 83% of our electricity is already carbon neutral, and we are on target to achieve 100% clean energy by 2035. To do so, we are working with local communities, including projects led by Indigenous communities across the country, whether it be for solar panels or wind turbines. And all of our clean electricity exports go to the United States. Worldwide, we must all accelerate our transition to renewable energy. This week, the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change published a new report showing that our planet will achieve a critical threshold in terms of climate change over the coming decade. That means more heat waves, more drought, more floods, and more endangered species.
When I think of the families I met on the Atlantic coast last fall who saw their houses being torn to pieces by Hurricane Fiona. When I think of the people of Lytton, BC, whose town burned because of a wildfire during a record-breaking heat wave. I know that responsible leadership means doing more to fight climate change, more to protect families. Climate policy is economic policy, is security policy. En tant que dirigeant, notre priorité
As leaders, our people's security is our top priority. Not only do we have to keep up the good work, we have to do more and faster. And I know you agree, Mr. President. I remember our discussion in 2016 on climate change when you were here in Canada as Vice President. You met with the premiers of the provinces and territories, as well as with Indigenous leaders. That same day, at the First Ministers' meeting, our government adopted the Pan-Canadian Framework on Clean Growth and Climate Change, which essentially puts a nationwide price on pollution. I'm pleased to be your host again today, knowing that environmental protection remains one of your top priorities.
Mr. President, what makes this such a moment of consequence is that our world, our way of living, is facing multiple threats. threats at the same time. That's why security policy is climate policy, is economic policy. Because climate change, inflation, war, energy shortages, but also foreign interference, misinformation and disinformation, and constant attacks on our values and institutions all compound. Democracies like ours, just like democracies around the world, didn't happen by accident and won't continue without effort. On doit être là, l'un pour l'autre.
We have to stick together. We have to continue to face down authoritarian threats, both at home and abroad. We have to continue to defend what is right. This is not the time to compromise on our values.
This is not a moment to compromise on our values. This is a moment to double down on them. We must continue to show resilience, perseverance, and strength. Resilience, perseverance, and strength. These are words that perfectly describe two men who are here with us today, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. Mr. President, when the plane transporting the two Michaels landed on Canadian soil after more than 1,000 days of arbitrary detention in China, Canadians proved that resilience, perseverance, and strength are more than just lofty ideals. They're commitments that drive our actions and shape our character. Canada got the two Michaels home, and we did it the right way, not just by respecting the rule of law, but by anchoring ourselves to it. When under great pressure to undermine our commitment to our agreements and treaties and to the rule of law, we did not capitulate. We did not abandon our values. We doubled down. And we rallied our allies against arbitrary detention, and through that, with your support and your leadership, Mr. President, the rule of law prevailed and the Michaels came home. Avec nos alliés et nos partenaires, les Canadiens
Together
et les
with our
Américains,
allies and partners, Canadians and Americans have to remain a source of inspiration to the rest of the world. But above all, we have to keep up the good work. Every day, we have to do what needs to be done to build a better future for people like Neil and Natalia, their kids and grandkids.
and we will meet this moment. Mr. President, in your most recent powerful State of the Union, you encouraged the American people to stay optimistic, hopeful, and forward-looking. Well, this is a vision that Canadians share too. So let's keep working hard, and together, let's continue to build a better future for our people. Welcome to Canada, my friend. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States of America, Joe Biden.
Good afternoon. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. Bonjour, Canada. I must tell you, I took 4 years of French in school. First time I attempted to make a speech in French, I was laughed at. So that's as good as I can get right now. But seriously, thank you very, very much. Speaker of the House of Commons, Speaker of the Senate, members of the Parliament, thank you for the very kind welcome for my wife and I. Prime Minister Trudeau, you were my first meeting with a foreign leader just 1 month after my presidency during the hardest days of COVID-19. We had to make a visit virtual, but since then, we've been all over the world taking on some of the toughest issues our nations have faced in a very long time. I want to thank you for your partnership and for your personal friendship. I thank you very much. Jill and I are grateful for the hospitality that you and Sophie have shown us. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to have the opportunity to uphold a tradition carried out by so many of my predecessors in addressing the hallowed halls of the Canadian democracy, although this is a different hall. You've done a hell of a job here. This is really beautiful. It's really very beautiful. This is a custom that speaks to the closeness of our relationship. Americans and Canadians are two people, two countries, in my view, sharing one heart. It's a personal connection. No two nations on earth are bound by such close ties, friendship, family, commerce, and culture. Our labor unions cross borders. So do our sports leagues. Baseball, basketball, hockey. Listen to this, hockey. I have to say, I like your teams except the Leafs. Tell you why. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. They beat the Flyers back in January. That's why. And if I didn't see that, I married a Philly girl. If I didn't say that, I'd be sleeping alone, fellas. I like you, but not that much. It can be easy to take a partnership between Canada and the United States as a given. And, but when you stop and think about it, it's really a wonder. 5,552-mile-long border, more than 8,800 kilometers, defined by peaceful commerce, trading relationships that measure more than $2.5 billion a day. Every day, hundreds of thousands of people cross the borders going in north and south to work or just to visit, knowing they'll find a warm welcome on the other side of the border. Americans love Canadians, and that's not hyperbole. It's a data-driven fact. Earlier this week, the Gallup poll did a new poll showing American opinions on different countries in the world. This is a fact. Canada ranked at the very top. 88% favorable rating among Americans. Up from 87 the year before. I take credit for that 1 point. I suspect every politician in this room would do a hell of a lot to get those kind of numbers. But there's a reason for it. The same fundamental aspirations reverberate across both our nations, from the Atlantic to the Pacific, to live in freedom. Not just freedom, but live in freedom with dignity. With dignity. To relentlessly pursue the possibilities of tomorrow. To leave our children and our grandchildren a future that's better because of our efforts, the people in this room and a similar room in the United States. President Kennedy said, and when he spoke here in 1961, and I quote, he said, "Ours is the unity of equal and independent nations, co-tenants of the same continent, heirs of the same legacy, and fully sovereign associates in the same historic endeavor to preserve freedom for ourselves and for all who wish it, for all who wish it." Through more than a century of that historic endeavor, Canada and the United States have had each other's backs. In war and in peace, we have been the stronghold of liberty, safeguard for the fundamental freedoms that give us our lives, literally, give our lives meaning. We have gladly stepped into the responsibilities of global leadership because we understand all that is at risk for Canadians and Americans alike when freedom is under attack anywhere in the world. Today, our destinies are intertwined and they're inseparable, not because of the inevitability of geography, but because it's a choice we've made again and again. The United States chooses to link our future with Canada because we know that we'll find no better partner, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, no more reliable ally, no more steady friend. And today I say to you and to all the people of Canada that you will always, always be able to count on the United States of America. I guarantee you. Together, we have built a partnership that is an incredible advantage to both our nations. That doesn't mean we never disagree, as any two countries will do from time to time. But when we disagree, we solve our differences in friendship and in goodwill because we both understand our interests are fundamentally aligned. As we stand at this inflection point in history, I had a professor who once explained an inflection point as you're going down the highway at 60 miles an hour and you rapidly turn in one direction 5 degrees. You never get back on the same path again. But you're on a different course where the decisions we make in the coming years will determine the course of our world for decades to come. It happens every 5 or 6 generations, but we're at that point. Nothing gives me greater confidence in the future than knowing Canada and the United States stand together still. Today, I'd like to speak a little bit about the future, if I may. A future that's ours to seize. You know, I get criticized at home sometimes for saying that I used to always, President Obama used to always kid me because I'd always say to him in our private meetings, a country's never more optimistic than its president or its leaders. Well, I have never been more optimistic in my life about the prospects. I really mean this from the bottom of my heart. We are so well positioned. The future built around our shared responsibilities, prosperity, security, shared values. First, it's a future built on shared prosperity, where Canada and the United States continue to anchor the most competitive, prosperous, and resilient economic region in the world. That's a fact. That's just a fact. Where our supply chains are secure and reliable from end to end because we're creating the value at every step right here in North America. We're mining critical minerals, to manufacturing, packaging the most advanced semiconductors in the world, to producing electric vehicles and clean energy technology together. A future where we understand that economic success is not in conflict with the rights and dignity of workers or meeting our responsibilities addressing the climate crisis, but rather those things depend on us doing that. Depend on us doing that. Factual. Since becoming president, I've been laser focused on rebuilding the U.S. economy from the bottom up and the middle out. not a whole lot trickled down from the top down on my dad's kitchen table. And by the way, when the middle class does well, the wealthy do very well. No one gets hurt. The United States made historic, and to the chagrin some of our critics in the press, bipartisan investments in infrastructure, innovation that are already bringing together and delivering concrete benefits to the American people. And we, you know, as we implement these legislative achievements, there are enormous opportunities for Canada and the United States to work even closer together to create good-paying jobs in both our countries. The Inflation Reduction Act, which I admit wasn't bipartisan, but nonetheless, all of a sudden I'm finding we have more adherence, represents the single largest commitment in tackling climate in our history. As a matter of fact, the single largest investment in all of human history. And it's going to spur clean energy investments all over the world. And explicitly includes tax credits for electric vehicles assembled in Canada, recognizing there's a simple reason. Recognizing how interconnected our auto industries are and our workers are. I am the most pro-union president America's ever had. Well, and I speak to a hell of a lot of Canadian union members. Look, this is a model for future cooperation, with both our nations investing at home to increase the strength of our industrial bases, making sure the products manufactured in North America are not only manufactured, but they're the best in the world. You know, we're going to amplify our shared commitment, climate action, while growing our economies. If I could just stop for just a second and say, you know, when I announced for president, I was always known as one of those kind of green Democrats, and Republicans used to be the same in my place. Well, guess what? I didn't announce my environmental plan, and I was getting beat up. Why is Biden all of a sudden changing? Well, the reason is I brought all the unions together. I brought them into the White House, not a joke, because they all said we're going to lose our jobs. And I pointed out, guess what? Every single solitary initiative required to deal with the environment creates union jobs, creates thousands of jobs, thousands of jobs. For example, I met with the IEBW and pointed out we're going to build 5,500 electric charging stations. Guess who builds them? Union workers. So look, we're coordinating the standard for new electric vehicles and charging stations, so Americans and Canadians can continue to easily cross the border without ever hitting a snag in their American or Canadian-built automobiles, zero-emission vehicles. Moreover, we're going to build batteries and technologies that go into those vehicles together. We've learned the hard way during the pandemic that when we rely on just-in-time supply chains, that circle the globe, there are significant vulnerabilities to disruptions and delays. And it drives up cost here at home, both Canada and the United States. But there's a better way. Our nations are blessed with incredible natural resources. Canada in particular has large quantities of critical minerals that are essential for our clean energy future, for the world's clean energy future. And I believe we have an incredible opportunity to work together so Canada and the United States can source and supply here in North America everything we need for reliable and resilient supply chains. Folks, to help make our critical mineral supply chains the envy of the world, the United States is making funding available under the Defense Production Act to incentivize American and Canadian companies to responsibly mine and process critical minerals needed for electric vehicles and stationary storage batteries. We're also building integrated supply chains for our semiconductors, a critical computer chip that I might note was invented in America, and then we lost control of it. We not only control it, we lost producing them. And the power of so much of our daily lives. The IBM plant in Bromont, Quebec, is the largest semiconductor packaging and testing facility in North America. Chips made in Vermont in upstate New York are shipped to Bromont to be packaged in electronic components. But now Bromont is expanding with the support of the Canadian government. And there's going to be a lot more work to do. Thanks to the Bipartisan Chips and Science Act I signed into law last year, companies are breaking ground for new semiconductor plants across the United States, representing billions of dollars in new investments in American high-tech manufacturing. $12 billion from Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company in Arizona. $20 billion in counting for Intel in Ohio. $100 billion in New York, the single largest investment of its kind ever in the world. And chips began to roll off these new production lines in America. A lot of them are going to be coming to Canada to be packaged. And that's a lot of jobs, good paying jobs. And today I'm also making available through the Defense Production Act $50 million to incentivize more U.S. and Canadian companies to invest in packaging semiconductors and printed circuit boards. Look, that brings me to a second pillar of our future. Because of our shared prosperity is deeply connected to our shared security. In the past years have proven that Canada and the United States are not insulated from the challenges that impact the rest of the world. The world needs Canada and the United States working together with our partners around the world to rally strong and effective global action. Nowhere is that more obvious than in our united response to Russia's brutal aggression against Ukraine. We've stood together. To defend sovereignty, to defend democracy, to defend freedom for ourselves and all who wish it. As I told President Zelensky, who I visited with in Kyiv last month, people all over the world are with the brave people of Ukraine. And you have to ask yourself, aren't you amazed of the personal bravery they're showing? It's incredible. It's incredible. Folks, I know there's a large Ukrainian diaspora here in Canada, not just the lovely lady we were all introduced to a moment ago, who feel the same way. Canada and the United States, together with a coalition of 50 nations we've jointly worked to put together, are making sure that Ukraine can defend itself. We're supplying air defense systems, artillery systems, ammunition, armored vehicles, tanks, and so much more. Tens of billions of dollars so far. Together with our G7 partners, we're imposing significant cost on Russia as well, denying Russia critical inputs to its war machine. We're independently holding Russia accountable for the war crimes and crimes against humanity that Russia is committing and continues to commit as I speak today. And Canada and America alike have opened their arms to Ukrainian refugees. Our people know well the high price of freedom. Our peace tower, your peace tower, stands testament to the sacrifices of more than 60,000 brave Canadians who perished in World War I, forever making this nation the champion of liberty. In the words of a Canadian poet, Lieutenant Colonel John McCree, still call to us from Flanders Field, echoing their charge through the ages. And I quote it, to you from failing hands, we throw the torch to you to hold it high. So today, let's once more affirm that we're going to keep that torch of liberty burning brightly and support the Ukrainian people. We'll not waver. Putin was certain he would have been able to break NATO by now. He was certain of that. But guess what? His lust for land and power has failed us far. Ukrainian people love of their country is going to prevail. In the face of President Putin's aggression against Ukraine, Canada and the United States are also making clear our commitment to our NATO allies. We'll keep our alliance strong and united. We'll defend every inch of NATO territory. An attack against one is an attack against all. And as we look forward to the 75th anniversary of NATO next year, Canada and the United States share a responsibility and a commitment to make sure NATO can deter any threat, defend against any aggression from anyone. That's the bedrock of the security of both our nations. Canada and the United States are not only partners in transatlantic security, we are Pacific nations as well. Earlier this month, we held our first U.S.-Canadian Indo-Pacific dialogue to deepen our cooperation in the vital region to promote an Indo-Pacific that is free and open, and prosperous and secure. We're also an Arctic nation. We both recognize the critical importance of this region to our collective security and the interest of other nations all of a sudden in the Arctic. We're working in close coordination to steward and protect the northernmost reaches of our world. And we are American nations, deeply invested in ensuring that the Western Hemisphere is peaceful, prosperous, democratic, and secure. And that starts with our commitment to defending our people and our own sovereign territory. NORAD is the only binational military command in the world. NORAD is the only binational military command in the world. Yet another way in which our partnership is exceptional. It is an incredible symbol of the faith we have in one another and the trust we place in each other's capabilities. Soon, NORAD will have a new next-generation over-the-horizon radars to enhance our early warning capacity, upgraded undersea surveillance systems, modernized infrastructure that is necessary to host the most advanced aircraft. And I'm looking forward to continuing to work in close partnership with Canada as we deliver on these needs, so that our people can continue to rest soundly, knowing NORAD is in the watch. Folks, we are. We're also coordinating closely to take on the human security challenges throughout the region. We're working in partnership with the people of Haiti to try to find ways to provide security, humanitarian assistance, and to help strengthen Haiti's stability. We're tackling the scourge of synthetic drugs that are devastating Canada and American communities, particularly our young people. Fentanyl is a killer. And almost everyone knows someone who has been affected by this, lost a child or lost a friend. Canada and the United States are working closely with our partner Mexico to attack this problem at every stage, from the precursor chemicals shipped from overseas, to the powders, to the pills, to the traffickers, moving into all of our countries. And we all know synthetic opioid epidemic has its roots around the globe, not just here. So today we're announcing a commitment to build a new global coalition of like-minded countries led by Canada and the United States to tackle this crisis. This is about public health. It's about public health. It's about public health, our economic futures, our national security. We're also working together to address the record levels of migration in the hemisphere. The Los Angeles Declaration on Migration and Protection, which the United States and Canada signed last June along with 19 other nations, represents an integrated new approach to the migration challenge, which is real. One that unites humane policies that both secure borders and support people. In the United States, we're expanding legal pathways for migration to seek safety and on a humanitarian basis, while discouraging unlawful migration that feeds exploitation and human trafficking. So today, I applaud China for stepping up. Excuse me, I applaud Canada. You can tell what I'm thinking about China. I won't get into that yet. I applaud Canada for stepping up with similar programs, opening new legal pathways for 1,500 migrants to come to Canada from countries in the Western Hemisphere. At the same time, the United States and Canada will work together to discourage unlawful border crossings and fully implement the updated Safe Third Country Agreement. Finally, as we advance our shared prosperity and security, we must never lose sight of our shared values, because our values are literally the linchpin holding everything else together. Welcoming refugees and seeking asylum seekers is a part of who Canadians and Americans are. In fact, the United States recently launched a new private sponsorship program for refugees. We call it Welcome Corps, which draws on Canadians' decades of leadership in refugee resettlement, where both countries build upon the nation-to-nation relationship with Native Americans and First Nations. We have both been influenced and strengthened by the contributions of a generation of immigrants. We believe to our core that every single person deserves to live in dignity, safety, and rise as high as their dreams can carry them. We strive to defend human rights, to advance equality and gender equality, to pursue justice, and uphold the rule of law. I want to note the outstanding work Canada has done to build a coalition of nearly 70 countries endorsing the Declaration Against Arbitrary Detention and State-to-State Relations. It's not only a statement of values. Our citizens are not bargaining chips. They're not diplomatic leverage. They're human beings with lives and families that must be respected. And I'm very glad to see the two Michaels, Michael Scarborough and Michael Kovring. They're safely back to their families after more than 1,000 days, 1,000 days in detention. If my mother were here, she'd say, God bless you both. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for having the opportunity to meet you earlier. You know, the incredible diversity that defines each of our nations is our strength. And the Prime Minister Trudeau and I know this is a belief that you and I share. We both build administrations that look like America and look like Canada. I'm very proud. I'm very proud that both of us have cabinets that are 50% women for the first time in history. Even if you don't agree, guys, I'd stand up. We took the lesson from you, because the bottom line is this. We make it easier for historically underrepresented, underserved communities to dream, to create, to succeed. We build a better future for all our people. So let's continue the work. Where there are no barriers, things look better. Where there are barriers to equal opportunity, we got to tear them down. Where inequity stifles potential, where we unleash the full power of our people, where injustice holds sway, let's insist on justice being done. Those are the shared values that imbue all of our efforts, our very democracy, our vitality, and our vibrancy. You know, it's what seems it drives us all. Some places and some persons are kind of forgetting what the essence of democracy is. We have to reach, so what allows us to reach beyond the horizon. Let me close with this. The year after President Kennedy spoke in Canada's Parliament, he delivered a famous speech at Rice University, issuing a challenge for Americans to go to the moon in a decade's time. And you remember what he said? You probably do, because we had to learn it when we were in school. We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do other things not because it's easy, but because they are hard. Because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept, one that we're unwilling to postpone, and one which we will win. That speech tapped into something deep in America's character, something powerful, a belief that we can do big things. If you hold a second, just think about it. Turn on the television the last 2 years, whether it's in your country or mine. After 2 years of COVID, people began to wonder, can we still do big things? Big things. We sure in hell can. That confidence, I believe it with every fiber in my being, that confidence can make the most audacious dreams reality. In less than 7 years after Kennedy's speech, the entire world watched humanity lift its first footprints on those further shores. It inspired a generation and spurred much of the technology advancement which now enriches our daily lives. Today, our world once more stands at the cusp of breakthroughs and possibilities that have never before even been dreamt of. And Canada and the United States are leading and will continue to lead the way. In just a few days, NASA is going to announce an international team of astronauts who will crew the Artemis II mission, the first human voyage to the moon since Apollo mission ended more than 50 years ago. Will consist of 3 Americans and 1 Canadian. We choose to return to the moon together. Together we return to the moon. And from there, we look forward to Mars and to the limitless possibilities that lie beyond. And here on Earth, our children who watch that flight are going to learn the names of those new pioneers. They'll be the ones who carry us into the future we hope to build. The Artemis generation. Ladies and gentlemen, we're living in an age of possibilities. Xi Jinping asked me in the Tibetan Plateau, could I define America? And I could have said the same thing if he asked about Canada. I said, yes, one word, and I mean it, one word, possibilities. Nothing is beyond our capacity. We can do anything. We have to never forget. We must never doubt our capacity. Canada and the United States can do big things. We stand together, do them together, rise together. We're going to write the future together, I promise you. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now I invite the Honourable George Fury, Speaker of the Senate, to say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. President Biden, Dr. Biden, Prime Minister Trudeau, Madame Gregoire Trudeau, distinguished guests, fellow parliamentarians.
On behalf of all parliamentarians and all the guests in this chamber, I have the great honor, Mr. President, of thanking you for your presence and your address before the Parliament of Canada.
It is an honor to have you with us here in our Parliament. On behalf of all parliamentarians, and indeed on behalf of all Canadians, I would like to express our gratitude for the very powerful words you have shared with us here today. I say, Mr. President, with no small measure of confidence, that your words have touched Canadians everywhere. Your message of hope, unity, and partnership is one that reflects the shared values and ideals that unite us. In May of 1961, when former President Kennedy spoke to our joint session of Parliament, he said that geography made us neighbors, but history made us friends. Your visit today, Mr. President, continues this very strong testament to the firm bond between our two countries, and it is a cherished reminder of our deep friendship. With the return of war in Europe, with the rising global assault on the very foundations of democracy, and with increased threats to the rules-based international order, we find ourselves living in a time of great strife, a time when the world looks to great leaders such as yourself, Mr. President, to restore calm, to strengthen the principles of democracy that unite us, and to ensure that the world is a better place for our children and our children's children. And I know I speak on behalf of all of us when I say that your call for renewed collaboration and cooperation on global security, on climate change, and on economic recovery will not go unheeded. Your lifetime, Mr. President, of dedication to public service, performed with a profound sense of duty as Senator, as Vice President, and now as President, is an inspiration for all of us who strive every day to reflect with honesty and pride the diverse views of those who we represent. Today, more than ever, Mr. President, we must shine a light on the darkness of conflict, chaos, and despair. We must all, despite our differing views and despite our diverging ideologies, come together for the betterment of our people. I believe you expressed it best, Mr. President, when you wrote in your book, Promises to Keep, that if you do politics the right way, you can actually make people's lives better. To make people's lives better, Mr. President, is indeed a path that we must all follow in public life. And it is right and fitting that we take this journey together as Canada and the United States of America. For the great task before all of us is to make this world a more peaceful and a more prosperous place for everyone. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. President, Dr. Biden, whether from the Oval Office, the Senate chamber, or from inside the classroom, you have given yourselves to public service, to bringing people together for common good, to lifting others up in shared sense of purpose. It has been said, Mr. President, that empathy is your biggest superpower. And what a superpower that is. Cela vous a permis d'aider les gens.
You've used your superpower to help people set common goals and set aside their differences.
You embody the words of one of your illustrious predecessors, the former President Jimmy Carter, who said, "What is needed now, more than ever, is leadership that steers us away from fear and fosters great confidence in the inherent goodness and ingenuity of humanity." Permettez-moi de prendre un moment.
Allow me to take a moment to say that our thoughts and prayers are with President Carter and his family at this difficult time.
I'll wait till the translation's done. Mr. President, Dr. Biden, you have both shown to the world that devotion to family and country are not mutually exclusive. The events of your lives, some heartbreakingly tragic, stand testament to how a life of dedication to family nourishes and strengthens us so that we may better serve others. Indeed, Mr. President, you have shown through example and deed the transformative power of leadership from the heart. For this, we thank you very much. Merci d'être ici aujourd'hui. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you very much. That was a wonderful speech. That was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, and as yet another standing ovation happens for now the departure of the president. That wraps up the past hour where we've heard primarily the address from the president, but also words from the prime minister. The president speaking for longer than expected, around 32 minutes. They are going to take a break right now, cross the street over to the John A. Macdonald building, where they will take a few questions from the media. But in the meantime, let's talk a little bit more about what we heard in that speech, the tone of the speech, and some of the sort of more moving moments. Certainly, Joe Biden, I'll bring in David Cochrane here, knows how to give a speech. I'll say that. David Cochrane, lots of levity and moments of seriousness, calls to action on a number of issues. No criticism of Canada on any issue, really. More an appeal for Canada to continue its support on various topics that we expected. But give me your take on what we heard there from the president over 30 minutes.
Well, when he started off with Bonjour Canada, he confirmed his French is as good as mine. Look, I think there's four big things that stood out for me, big themes in Joe Biden's speech, if I can break it down that way. The first is his conversation about what is essentially a shared industrial policy, that the United States and Canada are going to work together on electric vehicles, on semiconductors, on clean tech, on green jobs, on spurring that clean, climate-friendly, low-emission economic transition, all within the confines of continental security, learning the lessons of the challenges of just-in-time supply chains from the pandemic and being reliant on unreliable countries for your energy, for your goods, and for your core supply. So that would be number one. There's a reassurance there that as America aggressively pours billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars of subsidies and tax credits into the green transition, Canada is part of that plan. The second is sort of the shared global responsibility on security, speaking about Ukraine, drawing echoes to World War I and World War II, how essentially Canadian and American soldiers fought side by side, died side by side, and in many cases are buried side by side in the graveyards of Europe, how they're working together now in the support and defense of Ukraine against Russia, how they have a strong partnership in NATO, but also the need to strengthen NORAD. And so I believe the line was something along the lines of how people can sleep safely at night knowing NORAD is on watch, and also to work together to confront the growing threat represented by China in the Pacific and by Russia and China in the Arctic, pointing out that we are not only, we tend to think of the world, a lot of people do, or at least Canada's relationship in that North Atlantic context about NATO. But we're a Pacific country, as is the U.S., and with Alaska and the territories we're Arctic nations. Joe Biden was speaking about that. He talked about working together with the Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig, 4 or 5 standing ovations for them today. You know, acknowledge them as the Prime Minister did in a speech on working together to bring them home, and also talked about working together on the Artemis 2 mission to get people to the moon. That Jeremy Hansen, the Canadian astronaut, will be part of that. And as a final 4th point, and the one that really stuck with me, Rosie, he took a shot at the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I think that will resonate with many people across Canada, almost as much as anything that you saw in that speech there today.
Yeah, that unites a lot of Canadians, that's for sure.
Put that on a stamp. You know, that's a heritage moment.
And, you know, I'm not going to suggest that the Prime Minister is a Habs fan, but I think he probably is. So, yeah, I mean, there was lots of, I said, moments of levity where he poked fun at some of the sort of classic Canadian jokes. But I think you summarized where he went. I also thought some of the Prime Minister's comments were interesting, too, because obviously a lot of his focus of his speech was about Ukraine. That Ukraine still stands, that Canadian troops have invested, or that Canadian forces have invested a lot of time in training Ukrainian troops, 35,000 of them, undoubtedly to remind the world and Canada and the U.S. President that Canada has done a lot when it comes to Ukraine, if perhaps there are criticisms on the other front. I think you're right to point out that industrial policy too. I did think that the idea that we have heard from Janet Yellen and others in the United States around friendshoring, trying to create a supply chain, domestic supply chain that is reliable so we don't get caught as we did during the global pandemic, and kind of reassuring, I think, Canadian companies and industry, David, that there's a place for Canada inside that supply chain, that it's not a, America-focused supply chain, that this has to be created with everyone, particularly focusing on, obviously, critical minerals and the things that we have in spades and might be useful to that supply chain. I thought that was pretty interesting too, because it would reassure people in some ways that will happen and will continue to go forward. The president also obviously talking about Putin and how Canada and the U.S. are working together to reassure NATO allies that they will stand for them as well, that they will continue to participate in that. I mean, it was a strong speech about, I think, the Canadian-American relationship with moments of levity, and a strong finish where he talked about how we should never doubt our capacities as a continent. And those, I think, are probably important messages. I didn't hear any overt criticism of anything the Trudeau government has done or not done. Tell me if I'm wrong and if I missed something there.
No, I think to go back to the Leafs, I think they were the only ones catching strays in that speech. But he did make the point at the end, and in some ways, Rosie, the themes of both speeches kind of built off each other. With the Prime Minister speaking about how it never been more clear that everything is intertwined, right? Talking about climate, conflict, COVID, the cost of living, how all of these are interconnected as challenges, and all of these are interconnected as policy solutions, and all of these, to build on what Trudeau said and what Biden said, it's interconnected in a North American economic and supply chain sense as well, right? And so when Joe Biden ended his speech saying we are going to write the future together, he's kind of referring back, not just the auto sector, which we know is a key intertwined economic, pillar for both countries, but he talked about semiconductors and how chips made in Vermont are going to be processed and packaged and tested in Quebec, for example. The semiconductor expansion is going to be a real thing in North America over the next little while. I mean, the vast majority of semiconductors in the world are either made in China proper or in Taiwan. And with the geopolitical situation in the Pacific and the economic importance of semiconductors to a modern economy where we all have gadgets and technology to rely on, there is an imperative to have a continental, reliable supply chain of that. And this is something they talked about in Mexico in January at the North American Leaders Summit, and committed to developing a continental strategy on that. So the critical mineral components, where he made the point that the Inflation Reduction Act is going to unleash the most aggressive investment in clean technology in the history of the United States, and in Joe Biden's words, in the history of the world. Canada will be a part of that, and Canada will benefit from that. Now, that remains to be seen. We need to see, the actions and the reality lining up behind those words. But certainly the message and the intention from this president compared to the last president is that Canada is an enormous part of the economic future of the United States and a complement and a benefit to it, not a freeloader and a threat, as Donald Trump would define it during the NAFTA negotiations.
Okay, David, stay there if you will. I'll come back to you, particularly if this press conference is wildly delayed. But for now, let's go to Katie Simpson at the White House just to get a sense from Katie about what she heard and what she made of that speech, given you've listened to the president perhaps more than the rest of us, Katie. But what stood out for you there?
Well, that is the kind of speech that everyone in the Prime Minister's office is going to be more than delighted to hear. One of the biggest concerns that occupies time in the Prime Minister's office has to do with how is Canada going to ensure that it is a part of that integrated supply chain. And the way that Joe Biden enthusiastically sort of surrounded Canada with words of support, talking about the importance of that integrated supply chain, how building those new good jobs of the future is going to involve Canada. That is something that has occupied the highest level of the Prime Minister's office for months, if not years, through two generations or through two administrations here in the United States now. The big concern during the Trump administration was, of course, what was going to happen with NAFTA. That has all sort of been settled and put aside. But with President Joe Biden being a more traditional, more predictable American president, there's always the concern of protectionism. And that speech that Joe Biden just delivered there is going to send signals to the business community that they're looking for. It's going to send signals to the Prime Minister's office that they're looking for, that those deep concerns are going to be put to rest. One thing I was waiting for when perhaps the very friendly arm punch might come for a little bit of sort of say, hey, maybe we could use a little more Canada on this, a little more Canada on that. The moment didn't come. This is a big love-in. So that's really what sort of that, except for the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Which no one seems that upset about on this program anyway. But no. Okay, Katie, thank you. Stand by. We'll come back to you as well. I'm going to go to Hannah Thibedeau, though. There's some people still in the chamber chit-chatting away. We are expecting the president and the prime minister shortly for their press conference. But Hannah's snagged a guest over there. Hannah?
Yes, I have. I've snagged a guest. I snagged Health Minister Jean-Yves Duclos, and we are having some laughs out here ahead of time. We won't get into all of that. However, you were telling me your overall feel of this speech. Give it to viewers too.
Well, as you said, there was a lot of seriousness, a lot of fun too. And I was fortunate to be physically very close to the president, but also emotionally very touched, very close to what he was speaking about. Now, the fact that we are, yes, neighbors, but more importantly, we're friends. Our history made us friends. And he spoke about the importance of that friendship between Canada and the United States in the current world. No, a lot of other countries need that friendship. So it was very touching, very moving.
Let me ask you, you are from Quebec. He started off his speech with, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I thought he was talking about bonjour, and I thought the rest of the speech would be filled with French words, but he did admit to the complexity of the French language.
He said he had been studying it for 4 years, but that was about it. Also being a Quebecer, you enjoyed the dig he made at the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah, well, I was looking forward, when he spoke about the Leafs, which is not my favorite team, I thought he was going to speak about the Canadians, which he didn't do. So I think his speech was imperfect in that sense.
Let's talk a little bit about Roxham Road, because of course that is, your jurisdiction in your area as well. How important was it to get that agreement to close that Roxham Road point there for Canadians, really?
And for Americans too. Now, we are obviously a country very welcoming of all immigrants and newcomers, including refugees. Now, it's so important to welcome them. We have a big country, very people full of solidarity. So we need to welcome people as we have done throughout our history. We need to do this, however, in a way which is fair and appropriate. And that's exactly why our teams have worked so hard over the last months and years, and why we came to that outcome today.
And how hard was it to get to that outcome today?
Well, I think it was challenging, yes, but at the end it's a good outcome for everyone. But again, the most important thing is that Canada needs to continue welcome refugees, to host them, to take care of them, because of all the right reasons that we have seen throughout the history of our nation.
Otherwise, what point really stood out for you in the speech?
Well, the fact that he was speaking with such emotions again. No, it's obviously policies, billions of dollars, the climate crisis, security, economic development, the middle class. All of that is obviously essential to our relationship. But the sense of proximity and friendship between our two countries in a world where so many things pull people apart and sometimes bring them into a war. So we need to celebrate that friendship, which is unique and so special to our two countries, our people, but also so inspiring for so many others on the earth.
Jean-Yves Duclos, thank you for taking the time today. I had a great time.
Thank you.
Rosie, back to you.
Thanks, Hannah. Appreciate it very much. Obviously, that place emptying out pretty quickly, and that's in part because people have to get changed for this dinner and get on buses in order to make their way off to the official dinner tonight. But before that happens, the President and Prime Minister will leave this building, the West Block, and they will head just across the street, across Wellington, to this other shot you're seeing there, the Sir John A. Macdonald building, all decked out to receive the two leaders, where they will make statements and take some questions from the media. Not a lot of questions, but a few questions, probably around some of the things we've been talking about, China and election interference, but also about some of the substantive issues that have been resolved or, where there's been some progress made. Roxham Road, certainly one of them, Haiti another, and some other issues that they will talk more about. So that is supposed to happen probably in the next 20 to 30 minutes or so. I may now have jinxed us all, but that's what we're looking for. As I said, though, after that event, and actually while that event is unfolding, leaders, dignitaries, other diplomats, Canadian celebrities will attend a gala dinner over at the Canadian Aviation Museum. Now that is a bit of a drive from from the House of Commons, maybe 15-20 minutes away, although with the security and the traffic right now, maybe they'll get there a little bit faster. It sure is hard to maneuver down in the nation's capital today. The CBC's Travis Danraj is out at the museum, where I think you've been getting a sense, Travis, of the security at the next location. It's not like you can roll up in your own car or in your own limo. You have to come like the common folk, because the security is very tight there as well.
Yeah, well, and I don't have my own limo or my own car, so I came on the public bus that was leaving from the Shaw Center that all the media have to get on and do security checks there. But it is tight security around here. I just want to give you a little bit of news, though, because somebody from Pierre Poilievre's office was just texting me saying that the tete-a-tete, the pull-aside that is happening with the president and the leader of the opposition is happening right now. We're expected to get a readout when it comes to that, and also a picture of that a little bit later on. But let me show you right now, before they all move, because they are on the move here right now. This is just a little bit of the security presence here at the Aviation and Space Museum. It is very significant already. This area is locked down to vehicles, and obviously, you know, there's security inside as well. We're at the entrance. This is the red carpet, as you can see. Canadian, American flags that are set up. And, you know, when you think about Joe Biden's speech there to Parliament, he wrapped up talking about Canada and the U.S. going to the moon together. We're going there together. So this is an appropriate venue for this gala dinner tonight, the Aviation and Space Museum, because of the history of this place and because of the history of space and our partnership when it comes to missions. So we will be talking a little bit to some of the celebrities, some of the dignitaries that are arriving here once this gala gets underway. We know that Alan Doyle will be here, Mark Critch of CBC fame, Eugene Levy as well, Sarah Polley, who just won an Oscar. Those are some of the celebrity names. But also there are other notable guests as well, including the CEO of the Rainbow Railroad, which brings LGBT individuals that are in countries where it is quite dangerous for them to Canada. So really a host of guests that are expected tonight. And I've got the menu as well. And it is quite appetizing, actually. Cedar salt and seaweed crusted rare seared East Coast yellowfin tuna, along with Alberta beef braised short rib. And then for dessert, wild blueberry and Quebec maple mousse cake. So I'm not going to get any of that, but the folks inside, I just did take a look inside, Rosie. It's all set up for what will be a very important dinner tonight. That symbolism continuing here at the museum this evening.
Okay, Travis, thank you so much for that. It's a beautiful location, that museum, if people have never been. Lots of old aircraft and other things. There's a whole space room where you can go and check out space memorabilia if you have 5 minutes, Travis. So it's a cool place to have a gala dinner, that's for sure. People can walk around and mingle under the airplanes. Thank you. We'll come back to you as events get underway there. As Travis said, buses of people now have to make their way over there. It's so proving difficult to actually talk to some of the people that you might want to talk to after a speech because they all want to make their way to the museum, where security is extremely tight, and indeed cell phones probably won't be working much either. The CBC's Hannah Thibodeau, though, is back in the foyer and has found someone else who was lingering in the foyer. Hannah?
I always grab people as they walk by, Rosie. It's like, come on, you want to come on the show, right? Of course, we know who this is, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. Thank you for coming on the program.
Pleasure
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Overall, your impressions of the speech from President Biden?
Well, I really appreciated the focus on workers, on jobs, on union jobs. He was quite expressive about that. And that's quite something I was really touched by, in that we really care about workers and union jobs. He also made it clear that the challenges we're facing against with the environment have to be met with good paying jobs. And I thought that was a strong case, that we have to do both, create good jobs, protect workers, and protect our planet. And he made that argument really strong.
So overall, if you're to sit there and go, here's the message that President Biden sent to Canadians today, what would you say it is?
Well, he said this one word. He said possibilities. And that was the word he summarized basically everything, the possibilities. And the possibilities in front of us, if we make the right investments, tackle the climate crisis, create good jobs, support workers, good paying jobs, good union jobs, the possibilities are endless. And I think that's really the spirit of his speech. The possibilities in front of us, working together with Canada and working towards this goal. I think that was really an important part of his message.
Let me ask you about the two Michaels, Michael Kovrig, Michael Spavor, and I think everybody felt the emotion.
In the room.
Yeah, just tell me what it was like in there.
It was really, really powerful to see the two Michaels who had been detained, who had gone through so much hardship, so much difficulty, and to see them returned home and then to be in the House of Commons. It was a really powerful moment. Everyone got up together to applaud multiple times, just acknowledging that even the president, in addition to the prime minister, acknowledged the presence of both Mr. Spavor and Mr. Kovrig.
What were, there were a few funny moments in there as well. Which one stood out for you?
Well, right off the top, he was making light of himself, and I always think that's an example of someone who's got a lot of humility and a lot of confidence to be able to do both.
When he said bonjour.
Bonjour, yeah, I thought that was quite light. There's moments there he mixed up a word and then quickly said, you know what's on my mind, I'm worried about right now. So I thought there's a lot of light moments, but a lot of heavy and important moments as well.
What was the heaviest moment for you in there?
I think when he looked at the challenges in front of us, that there was a lot of challenges, and that we're at a precipice. You kind of put it like that we're at this turn point, and the decisions we make today and now won't just impact the next year or two, it will impact the next decade. And I think that really drives home how important it is that we make the right choices now to build up a true shared prosperous future for everyone.
Did you hear what you wanted to hear from him when it came to Chinese interference?
Chinese interference, there was not a major focus, but he did focus a lot on things that I was concerned about. The concern around making sure that we are a North America approach as opposed to a Buy America approach. And he did signal the importance of Canada and the American economy working together. So that was something that gave me a little bit of hope. I still want to see strong exemptions that make sure North America and Canada is included in that.
Okay, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, always a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Rosie, back to you.
Thanks, Hannah. Appreciate that. Please remind Mr. Singh he's coming on my show on Sunday, so we'll see him on Sunday morning. There you go. That is still the West Block, where as Travis had told us, the pull-aside between the official opposition leader, Pierre Poilievre, and the president is taking place, or maybe wrapping up. His deputy leader, Melissa Lantsman, had earlier said it had taken place. It did not. So it is happening now. After that, we should expect the two leaders to make their way just across the street for the official press conference before the gala dinner, and eventually the President and the First Lady will fly back to Washington later this evening, capping up probably what I would say is probably a successful visit. I'll let David come in and weigh in on that as well. I will say that while there was no particular mention of foreign interference, the Prime Minister did mention the word in his speech. There is a mention of it in the joint statement that has come out, where they do talk about, now I've lost the page, here it is, where they talk
Page
about
4.
the long, where they talk about the long, it's a very long, detailed thing, where they talk about the long-term threat from China, disruptive actions in the economy, human rights abuses, and democracy, and that they will continue to cooperate on countering foreign interference in societies that reflect our shared democratic values. So, I mean, there's an acknowledgement of it, and certainly it's a concern for both leaders. Is there anything in particular that is new that is happening? I think the answer is no. But there are other new things that were announced today, and some of them are quite significant. I don't know if you want to go through a few of them, David.
Yeah, just to pick up on the China point, like if you go back and listen to their speeches, the thread of the disruption of autocratic nations like China and Russia and what it has forced the democratic nations to do in the reorienting of trade, supply chains, and continental economic and military security, it is actions of countries like China with arbitrary detentions, like Russia with the invasion of Ukraine, that has driven a lot of the economic and industrial policy that the both leaders were referring to today. The embargo has been lifted on a lot of the bit by bits that have been agreed to in the run-up to this particular meeting between the two leaders, including the confirmation of Joe Biden double sourcing what Louis Blouin reported yesterday from Radio Canada, that they have an agreement on the Safe Third Country Agreement. The president misspoke, as I understand it, in his speech, saying that Canada has agreed to open up 1,500 additional slots. It's actually 15,000 additional slots. Reading off a teleprompter is hard sometimes, Rosie. You and I have both done this. But that's what it is. Canada's agreed to take in 15,000 people, migrants from the Western Hemisphere, people who would probably show up at the southern U.S. border, and agreed to create capacity and space for them within Canada. In return, the Safe Third Country Agreement will apply right across the Canada-U.S. border, so that anyone who is caught entering regularly or irregularly will be sent back to the United States to make their asylum claim there. Now, that's how it's going to work in principle. It comes into effect 1 minute after midnight tonight. The practicality of that, given the length of the border and the attempts at crossing, we'll see how that goes. There's some money put on the table here. Canada's increasing investments of up to $250 million in the Canadian semiconductor industry, a core part of the economic policy and industrial policy Joe Biden was talking about. There's an agreement from Canada to put $420 million into protecting and restoring the Great Lakes, to do some cleaning up on the border straddling water bodies, to protect against things such as algae bloom in particular. There is $100 million in additional equipment and support for the Haitian National Police to support peace and security in Haiti, as well as some additional sanctions against Haitian elite, but not the commitment by Canada to lead a multinational security force to Haiti that the U.S. has been hoping for. One thing the U.S. will like, investing $7.3 billion in infrastructure to support the arrival of our F-35 fighter jets as part of their NORAD modernization plan, and acceleration of forward refueling bases and airstrips in the Arctic, in Canada's north, to get ready for that next generation of fighter jets. I know from speaking with U.S. officials in the run-up to this meeting, they wanted Canada to take on a quicker, more serious role in patrolling the Arctic and in NORAD, thinking it's sellable to the Canadian public, and also, gets their defense spending on an upward trajectory that the U.S. has long pushed for. And if Canada can look after the Arctic more aggressively, it can free the U.S. up to deal with challenges in other parts of the world. So those are some of the developments that we've seen in the announcements that's just come out from the Prime Minister's office.
Yeah, I mean, some significant movement on some core issues for both countries, and some problems, quote unquote, resolved. I will say that apparently the Roxham Road deal, our Radio Canada colleagues are also reporting that it had been signed in some capacity about a year ago, that there was an agreement on which they were going to go ahead. But because there were so many mechanics behind it, that operationally couldn't do anything until now. But there had been, I guess, much more progress than we were led to believe, because that is what Radio Canada is reporting, that something was signed as late as a year ago.
I thought our colleague Alex Pineda made a really good point on this last night on At Issue, which I watched. And he made the point that when the Republicans started making border crossings from Canada into the United States an issue, it created political space for Joe Biden to be able to do this. So while they may have been working behind the scenes on amendments to the Safe Third Country Agreement, I know when Ambassador David Cohen, the U.S. Ambassador to Canada, was on my show a couple of weeks back, he said you can focus on Safe Third Country, you can focus on Roxham Road, but the real issue, the root causes are just these historically high levels of migration caused by conflict and poverty and economic crisis and political instability that has just become an absolutely enormous challenge all over the world, and certainly for the United States. So this is a politically fraught issue in the U.S. Border security. The focus is overwhelmingly on the southern border, of course, with Donald Trump famously trying to build a wall there and Joe Biden having to enact some policies there that have angered the more progressive elements of U.S. society. But it seems, based on the way politics has gone in the U.S., it's allowed this Canada-U.S. issue to be resolved, though a big challenge, Rosie, is going to be how that actually gets implemented, right? Because, people have been coming to Roxham Road because it's safe and it's streamlined and it's organized. You'll remember when we all really first started paying attention to these cross-border migrations a few years back, we had those incidents in like Emerson, Manitoba in the dead of winter, when people were crossing over, on snowy, frigid, freezing stretches of highway. And if, crossing irregularly is now a ticket back to the U.S., what will the truly desperate people do to try to get around the letter of this agreement and just get into Canada if they feel safer here?
Yeah, and I should point out, not everyone happy with this announcement. Amnesty International Canada says that they should have agreed to rescind the Safe Third Country Agreement, that they believe that this is not good for people who are obviously seeking refuge. And of course, they point out to the fact that this agreement has been in front of the Supreme Court of Canada and been heard there, although no decision has been rendered by the Supreme Court. So that may also change things going forward. But for now, I think it deals with a problem of a whole lot of people coming to one province to the point where the federal government was now taking people who maybe wanted to stay in Quebec and shipping them to other places in the country. Atlantic Canada, certainly Cornwall, Niagara Falls, Windsor, and other places, in order to try and disperse the weight of the number of people coming so that they all had better opportunity. Perhaps this will at least make it so that it is a kind of a fairer distribution of people in need across the country as well.
Yeah, and certainly, being a guy from Newfoundland and Labrador, there are population challenges in Atlantic Canada, right? There's a couple of thousand Ukrainians right now in my home province because the provincial government has directly airlifted people over, chartered flights to bring people from Ukraine and brought them into the airport in St. John's to sort of settle them there to find safe haven and maybe find homes. And in every sort of crisis, there is this opportunity that the Atlantic provinces are certainly willing to take some of these migrants who have crossed over the border, provided they get some help from the federal government, because they don't want to end up in the same situation that Quebec has ended up with, where your social service capacity, your educational capacity, and your retraining and caseworker capacity is simply overwhelmed by a surge and an influx. And that seems to be the approach going forward. It'll be interesting to see how this tweaks with the 15,000 spots that they've opened up under this particular agreement, how they'll be deployed around the country, whether it's apportioned by province, this sort of thing. We've got the high-level information right now. It's those more granular details that we have to wait for.
Yeah, and there is, you're exactly right. There's also a labor shortage across the country, so you can see how maybe some of that fits into a broader conversation. I will tell you before I go to Katie Simpson that one of our producers sent me a note that the sports networks have alerted the Biden visit because of the Leafs joke. So I guess that's how you hit all different channels. You just do that. And I would also say that President Biden is a bit of a chatty guy, so I don't know how long he will be with Pierre Poilievre, and I don't know how delayed the press conference will be either. But there you go. David, I'll come back to you, of course. Katie Simpson, as we wait for this press conference here in this room with the President and the Prime Minister, what would you expect to come up there? Perhaps to the President, like sometimes there are pressing domestic questions that need to be addressed, and sometimes there are questions that pertain more particularly to the visit. I don't know if you have a best guess here.
I think that possibly something on China is definitely going to come up. The big headline from yesterday was the hearing on Capitol Hill, but the head of TikTok, and he took lawmaker questions for about 5 hours, and pretty much every assessment of that hearing on Capitol Hill was the individual from TikTok got absolutely destroyed by the members of Congress at that hearing, got just absolutely ripped apart, because there really is no trust when it comes to China and what China is doing when it comes to surveillance. And nothing that was said at that hearing has actually changed the position of the Biden administration when it comes to TikTok. And so that is a deeply controversial issue here. Within the administration, lawmakers on both parties have both flagged concerns about China's ability to access data because this is a Chinese company. The Chinese Communist government has the ability to access whatever it needs. And the concern in the United States is right now, while that national security and security issue exists in one realm, TikTok is hugely, hugely popular. And it's particularly popular with a younger demographic. And does Joe Biden and do Democrats want to be the party of banning TikTok and alienating this very young voter demographic that tends more often to vote Democrat than it does Republican, particularly at this moment? So perhaps something on China, something on TikTok might come up. But of course, I would expect from Canada the ongoing situation involving China as well. So because this issue is so intense right now at this moment, that is what I would expect to happen.
Okay, Katie Simpson there at the White House. Looks nicer out there than it is here, but
it's chilly.
It's
chilly, rainy.
For Washington. For Washington.
It was 25 yesterday. It was nice.
I saw American Reporter with earmuffs on in Ottawa earlier, and it was 0 degrees. So, okay, thank you. I'll come back to you, Katie, a little bit later. I should tell you that in the foyer of the House of Commons in about 10 minutes' time or so, we are expecting Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre to come to the microphone to tell us a little bit about his meeting with President Biden. So we'll bring you that as soon as it happens. In the meantime, though, Hannah Thibodeau is also in the foyer, and she has another guest, perhaps someone who can tell us a little bit more about Roxham Road, if we're lucky there, Hannah.
I will try to get some more details for sure. That was going to be one of my first questions for Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino. One of the big announceables today was Roxham Road and the closing of it at 12:01 a.m. Can you give us any more specifics that we may not know about that at this point?
Well, first, great to be here on this historic occasion, a visit from President Biden to celebrate the unique and enduring allyship and friendship between Canada and the United States, where we talked about growth for middle-class jobs, protecting the environment, and yes, touching on a number of important security issues, including the fulfillment of a long-standing promise to modernize the Safe Third Country Agreement, which will now apply right across the border. It will also promote humanitarian pathways, as well as discouraging irregular migration, which can be very risky and dangerous to those who are making the journey from their home country. So we will work closely with our line agencies, including the CBSA and the RCMP. As you point out, that is taking effect tonight at 12:01 a.m. And we will also work very closely with human rights groups and immigration groups and asylum seeker groups so that we can protect the rights of those who have been vulnerably displaced.
Is there a concern that if it's not there, it will be somewhere else across the country?
Well, indeed, that's one of the reasons why this modernization is so important, which is to take a consistent approach in the way that we both promote lawful and admissible migration pathways for asylum seekers, but also to discourage irregular migration. And that's precisely what this new modernized agreement will do. We have worked very closely with the RCMP and the CBSA, as well as provincial police services, to make sure that we are coordinated. But we also want to protect the human rights of asylum seekers. You heard both the President and the Prime Minister talk about how refugees and asylum seeking rights protection is in keeping with the longstanding traditions of both of our countries. That will continue in this new agreement as well.
Yeah, so if we look down the road to this new agreement, can you give us a sense of what might change? What will look different?
Well, certainly we hope to see less risk to those who are making the journey and who are seeking legitimate asylum-seeking claims. And by taking this new approach that is consistent not only at official ports of entry but in between ports of entry, we hope to discourage some of that riskier voyaging and instead promote more lawful pathways. And that is indeed connected to the Safe Third Country Agreement modernization. We're going to work very closely with the United States to emphasize the shared hemispheric responsibility that Canada and the United States have when it comes to migration, which is a global challenge.
You were sitting in there for the whole speech. What really stood out for you when you're sitting there you know, as a cabinet minister, as an MP, as a Canadian?
I would say, well, three things. One,
Not just one, I have three.
I've got three things that struck me in the speech. One is not only the fact that we're close as two countries, but the personal friendship between the president and the prime minister, and they spoke about that. Obviously, second, the presence of the two Michaels there at a time when geopolitically there's so much going on, and to be able to have them and their spouses and their partners with them.
That was such a nice moment.
It was moving, and I think that they got the most number of standing ovations because they are the embodiment of that perseverance that the Prime Minister spoke of. And that is precisely what all democracies have to be in the face of the challenges that we are together confronting, which is to persevere and to anchor ourselves in our democratic principles. And they obviously, them being there was an inspiration. And the third thing was, it was the only moment in the president's speech that I took a little bit of umbrage with, which was his dig at the Leafs.
Oh,
I think that was a lighthearted moment, but aside from that,
Doesn't
it was...
everybody make a dig at the Leafs?
You know, I've got to stay true to my hometown, but aside from that, it was an A-class performance from both the Prime Minister and the President, and obviously a very historic day.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Hannah, can I throw one question through you to the minister?
Will do.
Yeah, can he tell us what will the border look like tonight? If someone's trying to cross that border tonight, what happens? What does it look like? Yeah.
Okay,
thanks.
Rosie has a question for you, and it's a very good question. So she was asking, you know, they shut the border down at 12:01 a.m. tonight. What will that border look like tonight?
Well, first, as I said, we're working very closely with the RCMP and the CBSA to be sure that we manage the new era of the agreement, and that is something that we have been consistently coordinating.
They get turned around, though.
That's one of the new rules, and the application of the agreement is that there will be a consistent application of the SDCA both at official ports of entry as well as in between ports of entry, and then we will continue to map out the next steps of this closely with the United States.
Is there a concern there might be a run on the border before 12:01 a.m.?
I think that's a fair question. That's one of the reasons why we are applying it so close to the announcement, which is to reduce the risk of there being a potential rush at the border. We're going to work closely with human rights advocates, with refugee advocates, to make sure that they have all of the information that they need so that individuals who are lawfully seeking asylum in Canada understand their rights, but also to make sure that we are discouraging those who may not be here for the purposes of making an asylum claim. And that is one of the things that we talked about today. You heard from both the Prime Minister and the President, which is promoting humanitarian values through legitimate pathways. We are going to connect that work with the modernization of the STCA, but also discouraging irregular migration, which poses risks to those involved.
Did the Americans say, oh, there might be a concern from their side that there will be all these people potentially spun around tonight?
I think Canada and the United States have a mutual interest in promoting as much information as possible, working closely across the border with law enforcement communities, with refugee advocates, and that is precisely what we are doing. We want to make sure that those who have a legitimate claim in Canada are able to fully exercise their rights in a way that is safe and secure and that promotes the integrity of our immigration and refugee system. And by modernizing the Safe Third Country Agreement, we have fulfilled a commitment, and going forward together, Canada and the United States will address this shared hemispheric responsibility together.
Okay, Marco Mendicino, Rosie, is that it?
Thank you for squeezing more out of him. That's perfect.
Okay.
I knew you would get a little more there. Thank you. I appreciate it.
It's like, okay, perfect. We are going to let you go now.
Okay, that's good.
Thank you, Public Safety Minister.
Thanks,
okay, thank you, Kyle.
Thank you, Hannah. Appreciate that. Let's go now to Alex Panetta, Washington correspondent, who came to town for some of this. Alex, nice to see you. How are you? If I can see you, maybe not. Alex Panetta, you got me? Oh, we think he froze. That's I don't know how that could happen. There you go. Well, I do know how that could happen. There's lots of jamming of signals in downtown Ottawa right now. It's very hard to get cell phones to work in some parts. Or we're just really unlucky. That's also possible. I'll just tell you what you're looking at right now there. That, of course, is the security awaiting U.S. President Joe Biden, who's going to zip across the street where the press conference will be held with the Prime Minister in short order. We're also standing by and to hear directly from the Conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, who will come out to the foyer to take a couple of questions about his one-on-one with the president, what they discussed, what Pierre Poilievre raised as an issue, perhaps, an issue that maybe wasn't addressed by some of the things that have been already announced today and that we'll hear more about this afternoon from the two leaders. We'll bring back Alex Panetta when he has a moment, because I'd love to get his take on what he's heard today. But let's bring in now the host of Power and Politics, David Cochrane, just moments away from this news conference. You know, we talked about how we expect some sort of question on China. Katie Simpson agrees with us, so I think we're on track there. I wonder, though, from your perspective, what we heard a little bit more details about Roxham Road from the minister, which was helpful. But from your perspective, where are the places where we don't quite know what is happening on a file or how it's going to work? What questions do you still have around some of that?
Well, I don't know if the questions are there so much on the fill in the blanks of the bilateral issues discussed. I am curious to hear if President Biden is satisfied with the NORAD spending that has been rolled out by Canada in this and the commitments made. You know, is that everything we need to do, or is that the best we can do or are willing to do as a country? Because, you know, we do have challenges, Canada does, on defense procurement and defense spending and getting things done, and just how confident the president is on that particular thing. I suspect, though, this is Prime Minister Trudeau's first public appearance and opportunity to take questions, though he did speak to CNN and others yesterday since the Han Dong resignation from his caucus, resigning as a Liberal MP to Citizen Independent because of the allegations, the uncorroborated allegations reported by Global News that Mr. Dong urged Chinese diplomats to further detain or lengthen the detention of Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig, who featured so prominently in everything we saw today because of what is described, in my view, as a tortured political argument that holding on to Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig longer would somehow benefit the Liberals, as an early release would benefit the Conservatives. And anyone who remembers that time, that's a political calculus that makes little sense, because the best day for the two Michaels to be released for the sitting government was that day, any day, as soon as possible. So I'm curious to hear what he has to say about that. And given that, you know, Joe Biden played such a role in that since assuming the presidency and worked on the settling of the legal issues with Meng Wanzhou in the U.S. justice system, whether he's asked about this and what he has to say. Because, you know, as we were talking earlier, the challenges and the threats presented by China, and everything from supply chains, you know, to election interference, to foreign influence operations, you know, the disruption caused by the Russian invasion of Ukraine, what that's done to energy supplies and energy markets in Europe, for example, key allies of Canada and the United States, the disruption to food supply and global trade all around. It is the actions of these autocracies and the views of the democracies of the world that has destabilized things and has forced a lot of the economic realignment that we've seen the two leaders talking about in the run-up to this summit and in their speeches and in the news releases that they sent out today.
Okay, David, we'll come back to you. I'm going to go live to the foyer of the House of Commons now. Pierre Poilievre is speaking.
The friendship between our two countries. I also reiterated our support for our military forces in order to protect continental security, including in cooperation with NORAD. And I also mentioned that Canada should again receive an exemption from Buy America that happened during the Harper-Obama years. We had an agreement with Mr. Obama to exempt Canada from Buy America, but now it's the same discriminatory policy that applies to Canada, and that is harming our construction workers, among others. And finally, we must put an end to the softwood lumber tariffs applied by the United States, which are affecting our forestry workers. Again, this is an issue that was resolved during Conservative years, but that is again with us after the reapplication of these tariffs. And And now there must be fairness when it comes to our economy and free trade. And I also brought up another topic, which is vaccines. We allow unvaccinated Americans to come here. Americans allow their own citizens to cross the border without being vaccinated, and I suggested to President Biden that he should put an end to any obligation in that area preventing people from crossing the border into the United States. So again, it's just common sense. We have to bring common sense home with a stronger friendship for the benefit of our two peoples.
Just finished an excellent meeting with President Biden, where we discussed the need for Canada to bolster its defenses, to cooperate further on NORAD, but also to bring fairness to Canadian workers. After Prime Minister Trudeau took office, the United States slapped us with Buy America rules that discriminate against our workers, and new tariffs on our softwood lumber, two issues that Prime Minister Harper had resolved with the earlier Bush and Obama administrations. So I sought an end to softwood tariffs and an exemption for Canada for Buy America. Finally, I encourage the President to remove vaccine mandates on Canadians crossing into the United States. The U.S. government no longer requires vaccination for its own citizens to cross the border. Canada allows Americans who are unvaccinated to come here. There are millions of good, decent, honorable people who, through a personal medical decision, are discriminated against at the border, and I encouraged the President to lift those restrictions to allow them freedom of mobility across our southern border. In essence, what we have to do is bring it home for our country, bring home our jobs, bring home our industry, bring home our paychecks, bring home security, and bring it home for this country. Thank you very much.
No, your office said that you weren't invited. What exactly happened? Well, the government sent an invitation to an email that I haven't used for 7 years, and they lied to the media saying that I had refused the invitation. I never refused the invitation, so that is a lie. Again, this is disinformation on the part of Justin Trudeau.
Your requests.
Excellent response. President Biden wants to be a friend of Canada. And I know that if our government had raised these issues with him, he probably would have been more responsive. If we had a Prime Minister who was fighting for our forestry workers and our construction workers and for Canadians who are not vaccinated, I'm sure that the President would have received those interventions very well. But I don't believe that Prime Minister Trudeau has pushed and fought on behalf of Canadians. But I have to say that President Biden was very receptive. He wants to be a good friend and neighbor to Canada, and that's why I was so encouraged with our meeting.
How do you feel when Biden asked you to stand up in regards to the remarks about gender parity in the governments?
Well, we support gender equality for all Canadians.
How do you personal, like, what is it like? This was your first time meeting the president. Just give us your, personal impressions.
Well, I shared with him that we both have Irish blood. My biological grandmother was Molly Malloy, and my biological grandfather was Patrick Farrell. And of course, it doesn't get more Irish than Biden, and so we just both agree that there are only two types of people, those who are Irish and those who wish they were. But he's a friendly, decent, good partner for Canada, and it was clear from our interaction that he wants the best for both of our countries.
With respect to Roxham Road, we're hearing in the wording of the agreement that has been released that the agreement enters into effect at midnight, and yet the terms of that agreement were negotiated a year ago. What is your reaction to that? Well, first of all, I think we need to recognize that we never had a problem with massive illegal migration before Justin Trudeau. We had the same safe third country agreement before Justin Trudeau, the same border, but we never had that problem of people crossing the border in large numbers as we saw under Justin Trudeau. So he is the one that opened up Roxham Road, and he is the one that caused the problem. And that's why a month ago I called on the Prime Minister to find some way to shut down Roxham Road. And finally, we're hearing there is an agreement that will allow us to do that, and I hope that agreement will work. And we don't know why the Prime Minister took so long to do this.
Yes. We never had a problem at Roxham Road or any sort of problem with mass illegal migration before Justin Trudeau. Even though we had the same 6,000-kilometer border, we had the same safe third country agreement, we never had this problem until Justin Trudeau created the infrastructure and gave the message that this was the right way to come to Canada. And now we're hundreds of millions of dollars into costs. Many other immigrants who applied properly are waiting longer. We have 1.1 million immigrants in the queue, a record backlog. This is the broken immigration system that Justin Trudeau has created. We hope that he will undo some of the damage he caused in this new agreement with the United States of America. We will watch very carefully. Our view is that we should close Roxham Road, but more quickly process the lawful immigrant applicants, including refugees, so that we can bring more brilliant Canadians to help build our country.
But did it come up in the meeting? Did it come up in the meeting? I'm wondering what you make of the way President Biden right now is approaching green transition, the billions, in fact, that he is spending on this, the pressure that's on Canada to match it financially, and where you stand on all of that, whether it is the government ought to be matching what Biden is doing, or how you see that.
Well, I say first, do no harm. And right now, our government is doing immense harm to the possibility of green jobs in this country. By its own admission, this government takes as much as 25 years to grant a permit for a mine. We have all the minerals necessary for electric car batteries right here in Canada, but we can't produce them because of government gatekeepers that make it impossible to get it approved. The Ring of Fire in Ontario has been talked about for 15 years. The First Nations there have been waiting 5 years for a permit for a highway to get to the Ring of Fire, and they don't even have a shovel in the ground yet. So the biggest problem is government gatekeepers that prevent us from permitting mines, factories, and other necessary green infrastructure to get these things built. So a Poilievre government will get out of the way so that Canadians can get things done, and we will bring home the production of all kinds of energy to this country.
One last question. Did Roxham Road come up at the meeting? Did the President raise it, or did you raise it? Please tell me, sir.
He did not, because I have not had an opportunity to comment on the proposed arrangement that they brought forward, so I didn't want to make an uninformed comment. I want to take some time to study what it is that they're proposing before I bring it up.
Okay, thank you. Following recent allegations about Han Dong.
Well, first of all, I think it was very moving and very touching to have the two Michaels here, two courageous men who survived unimaginable hell, and I was very heartened that everyone in the chamber gave them such a warm welcome. I'm not going to pass judgment on these allegations because I don't know all the facts, but I will say this. Only a public inquiry can get to the bottom of this. And I note that Mr. Han Dong has actually voted in favor of a public inquiry. So for his sake and for everybody's sake, and most importantly, for the sake of the truth, the Prime Minister has to end his cover-up and call a full public inquiry. Thank you very much.
Did you get to meet the two Michaels, right, sir?
Is Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, who got a little bit of time alone with the President, where he raised a few issues that he felt needed addressing. I should tell you that it's not unusual for a President, if they're visiting Canada, to make time for the leader of the official opposition. So Pierre Poilievre got that space to do so, saying that he raised issues of Buy America and softwood lumber, ongoing issues around some of the tariffs there. We are standing by at this hour for the press conference from the President and the Prime Minister, expected to take place very shortly before they make their way to the last part of this official visit, which is a gala dinner with hundreds and hundreds of people who are going to attend that at the Aviation Museum, and we'll have coverage of people arriving at that dinner. It'll be many of the same people, of course, that were inside the chamber of the House of Commons. We are standing by, as I said, for that press conference. But for those of you watching in Newfoundland, that's it for us. Your local news starts in just a moment. Thank you for watching this. You can go get the news in your region right now. Our live coverage continues elsewhere. Okay, and now we are back now on the rest of the network, except for Newfoundland. Sorry, David, we had to let your province go. They've got other things to do.
Here and Now is a very important show. It's where I got my start, and I'm okay with that. I mean,
they can still turn on News Network if they want to hear the rest of it, so they're fine. Just some initial thoughts from you on what you heard from Pierre Poilievre.
What an abrupt change in tone from what we saw in the speeches in Parliament, where Joe Biden talking about everything being possible, to Pierre Poilievre essentially going back to his mantra of everything is broken. It was pretty stark when you listen to what he talked about there, where Joe Biden in his speech offered significant reassurance on the clean transition and how Canada can fit into that. Poilievre going back to two lingering economic concerns for him. One is softwood lumber tariffs, which have a long and complicated history in this country of being on and then off and resolved and then unresolved, arguing that this was taken care of by the Bush-Harper administrations and has now come back under Justin Trudeau, clearly trying to put the blame on that at the feet of the Prime Minister, and talking about the lack of a clear carve-out for Canada in the Buy American policy as something he is still concerned about, though we are seeing more and more comfort as more details come out of the U.S. Buy American policy from industry groups and for example, Canada's ambassador to the United States, Kirsten Hillman, who has made a couple of points that it may not be as bad as people think on first blush. It's interesting that he made a request also to the U.S. president to lift all vaccine mandates at the U.S. border for non-U.S. citizens. That is still in place. This, of course, was a big issue a little over a year ago when the trucker convoy occupied the downtown area where the president and the prime minister are now going to freely travel. The Sir John A. Macdonald building was right in the middle of that detention, that he thinks this is something that should be lifted, talking about millions of honest, hardworking people who are unable to travel into the United States right now. Poilievre, of course, supporting the initial message of the so-called Freedom Convoy a year ago, bringing that argument to lift the vaccine mandates at the U.S. border by the U.S. government directly to the U.S. president himself. And of course, the fiasco that's been evolving all afternoon, Rosie, about his dinner invitation, arguing that the government sent this to an email account that is inactive. It is what's called a P9 account. Every parliamentarian has one of them. Pierre Poilievre is the first parliamentarian I've heard of who does not monitor his account. But either way, there is some partisan sniping going on over this, like there is all the time in this town. He's got an invitation to the dinner now. Everything is broken, I guess, including his email account, but the invitation is working, and he'll be allowed to go to the gala dinner tonight with Joe Biden.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, sometimes when I send it to those accounts, MPs don't respond to me, but then I just take it personally, as opposed to thinking the account is locked down. So I don't know where that ended up. I do think it's interesting, though, that he was asked about the Han-Dong allegations, because they hadn't really said very much, the Conservatives, and didn't actually want to pronounce on the story itself, because he said he didn't know the details. So he's kind of staying away from that, but still reiterating a call for a public inquiry, which is where the Conservatives want this to go. Yep.
They went hard at it in question period, though, Rosie. When the first global story first came out, I think I remember Melissa Lantsman at one point saying, for the 7th time, I want the Prime Minister to tell me, when did he know a member of his caucus was advising the government to detain the Michaels? There's since then been a divergence in the reporting, with the Globe and Mail reporting that the Prime Minister's office has seen the transcript of the conversation between Han Dong and the Chinese consulate official and drew no negative conclusion from it. No actionable intelligence was included in that. And the Globe and Mail also revealing that it had this information as well, had been working on this and working on the reporting for weeks, but never got it to the level where they were comfortable to report it because they couldn't get a copy of a transcript or an audio recording. So this may cause a shift in how the opposition approaches this. Certainly, Han Dong has resigned from the Liberal caucus because of this, and Pierre Poilievre is right. He did vote in favor of a public inquiry when the NDP got that motion to a vote yesterday, because let's face it, he needs a way to clear his name. He's not accused of a crime. There's not going to be a trial. There's not going to be, a verdict or the police dropping the charges the way there would be in a criminal offense. He has been named and indicted based on uncorroborated, unnamed intelligence, and he's looking for a way out and a way to clear his name in what's been a pretty charged political environment here.
Yeah, the threat of a defamation suit that Han Dong has made against Global News may also influence how much opposition leaders want to say outside of the House. David, we will come back to you. Just for people wondering, Power and Politics will be on today. Whether it starts at 5 o'clock is another issue, but David will have lots of coverage of everything when events are done here. He's got lots of guests to analyze things and, of course, watch the gala dinner as it gets underway. Meanwhile, let's bring in Alex Panetta. We finally managed to make all that happen, and he's here in Ottawa. Alex, good to see you. I want to first ask you about a tweet that you put out not too long ago about critical minerals, because it was not something that had caught my eye, so I wanted you to sort of explain to me what that is and how significant that is.
Sure. So the U.S. Defense Production Act is a mechanism by which the president can say to the Department of Defense in the United States, here's a pot of money, spend it however you like on the following issue, right? And the United States has used the Defense Production Act over the last year or so on a few strategically critical sectors, including critical minerals. Now, what's interesting about the Defense Production Act is Canada is a member of the United States Defense Industrial Base. Like, we're basically part of their military-industrial complex through legal mechanisms that have that predate my time in Washington.
I'll just interrupt you for 1 second, Alex, just because President Biden's leaving the West Block now and going to jump in his car and roll around the corner. But you can keep talking. Sure. Just wanted to flag that. Yeah.
So the man on that screen apparently has decided that. So what I heard over the last few months in Washington, I actually attended a briefing once from a member of the Department of Defense explaining to a bunch of Canadian lawyers saying, here's how you can access this money, that Canada will be allowed to apply. So that was confirmed by Department of Defense officials a few months ago. What we learned today, in that statement the White House just released, and I take it it's the same as the Prime Minister's,
yes,
that the money will start flowing to Canadian and American companies starting this spring. So they essentially confirmed today that Canadian mining companies or companies working on critical minerals will have access to U.S. military funding starting this spring. Not clear how much they'll get, and it's not like they're going to take an equity stake in these companies. This is essentially free money.
Yeah.
It's quite an interesting development. And in addition to that, there's something on semiconductors. They're looking to use the Defense Production Act on semiconductors. And in that statement today, lo and behold, Canada will have access to semiconductor money as well. Not sure we'll fare quite as well in that regard, because I think they're really looking to Canada on critical minerals.
Okay, that's fascinating, and I'm glad you caught that, because I certainly did not, and you put it into perspective. Now, I have to go back to your column that you wrote earlier in the week, where you said these speeches tended to have sugar and medicine, and I'd like to put on the table that there was not a lot of medicine in this speech, but you tell me if you heard some there from President Biden.
Zero. That speech was all sugar. That thing was like a truck filled with cotton candy, all right, rolling slowly through Ottawa. All right, a different type of truck convoy. No, that was extraordinary. And you know, like to be fair, and it wasn't a column, it was a news analysis. At the bottom of that piece, I said, well, maybe he'll do something a little different from those aforementioned speeches. Maybe he'll do what Bill Clinton did in 1995. That speech was also all sugar. Frankly, what I take away from that is either any dirty laundry they had, they either dealt with in advance, and like on the example of Roxham Road, or they decided very consciously not to air it in public. And I don't think everyone got everything they wanted today. I mean, I think it was definitely a feel-good day. But I mean, Canada doesn't get the Buy American carve-outs. What it did get was a new mechanism on clean energy, which is going to touch everything from vehicles to critical minerals, where the countries will work together under this new task force to make sure they're integrated on these issues. So it's not a Buy American carve-out. What it is a new way of trying to avoid these issues and these irritants in the future. I don't think the United States got the defense funding commitments it wanted, certainly not publicly now. We'll see what's in the budget next week. There's some funding for defense issues, but it's supposed to come from existing Canadian announcements. We'll see whether anything new is announced next week. So, you know, and I don't think the United States got the Haiti multilateral force they were, and which I don't think they expected entering this either. So, you know, like they don't walk away with a whole bunch of new commitments that solve every irritant, but you they walk away with a little bit. Both countries agreed on a bunch of stuff, and clearly was a feel-good day. The one discordant note, I would say, that little verbal flub where the president, after saying a ton of nice things about Canada, being aired live on CNN, which is the kind of exposure any country would kill for in the United States, he then goes and says something like, I applaud China. Sorry, I meant Canada. You know what's on my mind is China. That thing, within like 8 nanoseconds, was weaponized by the Republican Party. They put out a little clip of him saying, I applaud China, and that's, all over social media. And, tens of millions of Americans, that's the only thing they're going to hear about this speech. And that's kind of the blood sport of politics today, isn't it?
Yeah, I have seen it also tweeted by at least one Conservative MP using it against the Prime Minister by saying it wouldn't be normal for the President to get mixed up on things right now. So you're right. Sometimes flubs make stories, or they go viral. Anyway, Alex, apparently you have to go and do radio, but thank you for coming back. Always appreciate your super analysis. Thank you, sir. We can't keep him, though. He has to go back to Washington, apparently. Thank you, sir. As we've been telling you, the leaders are going to attend this gala dinner tonight. It will happen not long after this press conference. You saw President Biden drive right across the street. Lots of security, obviously, when it comes to the president. That's the street the Prime Minister usually just walks across in order to get to events there at the John A. Macdonald building. President was driven over, so we will wait in the next couple of moments to see if that gets underway. Let's do a quick check back, if we can, with Travis Danraj at the Canadian Aviation and Space Museum in Ottawa, where the dinner is taking place. You probably haven't seen anybody, I'm guessing, because everything's delayed, but maybe someone's arrived.
No, just us right now. I mean, you know what? There are rehearsals going on, Rosie. There are some of the singers, some of the performers that are here right now doing sound checks and such. And wrap me, by the way, if you need to, because I know that that's a short drive across the street. Yeah. But, the arrivals are going to be a little bit later on this evening. We've been talking about security around this building right now. It is tight. It took quite a time for us to actually get here, the media to get here, because we had to go through several different checks, and of course the guests will as well. We just saw actually the waiters come in, and they had to go through security checks as well. The guest list quite extensive tonight. You talked about some of the dignitaries that are going to be here. Now, this isn't an official state dinner, so that means the Governor General, Mary Simon, and her husband are actually relieved from their hosting duties, and they can attend as guests. Some of the other notable guests, well, a lot of big names when it comes to entertainment in this country. Mark Critch, Alan Doyle, Sarah Polley, Eugene Levy, and Eric McCormick, of course, best known for his role on Will and Grace. There will be ambassadors here. There will be diplomats, as I said, and also a lot of people from the nonprofit community, including the CEO of the Rainbow Railroad, also different directors for Dignity Network Canada, and also there will be members of different unions here as well. So quite a mix of folks here. And Alex was talking about the fact that the speech that the president gave was a lot of sugar. There will be sugar here on the menu tonight as well, because it is quite an appetizing meal that they have prepared, including Alberta beef braised short rib, butternut squash puree, and Yukon gold potato, wildflower honey, roasted carrots, and fine green beans as well. So that is a bit of the color here. The guests have not arrived, but I am standing by position 1 for you as soon as the guests do arrive, Rosie, and I'll have all that for you from the red carpet, live from the Aviation and Space Museum tonight here on CBC News Network.
Thank you.
There you go. What a promo, isn't that?
I know. I should say there are people who are political celebrities, as you've pointed out as well. Lots of people who are part of the PM's NAFTA Council, Rona Ambrose, James Moore, Marc-André Blanchard. So there'll be lots of political types as well mingling with the Canadian celebrities. Travis, thank you for that. We'll be back as events unfold there. We've been given the 2-minute warning for this press conference. Certainly, I am skeptical of that 2-minute warning, but that's what we've been told. It will start shortly at any rate. We would expect the leaders to give some brief statements and take a number of questions. Maybe 4 is what I would think. This isn't going to be an excessively long press conference. But I think the idea here would be to ask some questions around the news of the day and also some of the details about what was agreed upon at this meeting, the first meeting in quite some time for a U.S. president coming to this country for a one-on-one visit and a stayover last night, although he's traveling back to, I actually think he's traveling to Delaware tonight when he leaves Canada later this evening. The dinner itself gets underway around 6:30 or so. David Cochrane is here too, standing by, before we hear from the two leaders about what everyone agrees. I think was a good meeting. Was a meeting that was not difficult for either of them. The questions may be difficult here. We'll see, but the speeches at any rate were complimentary and glowing and appreciative of the partnership between Canada and the U.S. You wouldn't expect to see anything else, but it is always interesting to see that friendship and that partnership in full effect and full display. Here the two leaders are entering the room, so I won't actually say much more as they pull up to these podiums to say a few words and take some questions in English and French, although only one will answer in French, obviously.
Bon après-midi tout le monde.
Good afternoon, everyone.
To welcome my friend, President Biden, Joe, to Canada this week. We had the opportunity to discuss the progress made under the February 2021 roadmap for a renewed U.S.-Canada partnership, a plan our countries put forward a month after the President was sworn in. Aujourd'hui, avec le Président Biden,
today, with President Biden, we've made progress on several important files, and I'd like to mention some of our common priorities. Growing the middle class, strengthening the economy, making life more affordable for people, fighting climate change and protecting the environment, protecting our citizens and our values.
In this serious time, with all the challenges we face, we're doubling down on our partnership and on our friendship. As I said earlier today, economic policy, climate policy, and security policy aren't just connected. They're one and the same. Both the President and I agree on this, and that's why we launched a joint energy transformation task force that will accelerate our work on clean energy and clean tech. This will include securing and strengthening electric vehicle and critical mineral supply chains and other areas to advance our collective energy security. Of course, an integrated approach means creating good middle-class jobs for workers on both sides of the border, and it will make our collective economic growth stronger and more resilient. Securing and developing critical minerals supply chains is essential to making things like batteries, computers, phones, and semiconductors. Le Canada et les États-Unis ont convenu de mettre en place.
Canada and the United States have agreed to put in force a system for building semiconductors, and so I'd like to announce today that we have signed an agreement with IBM to extend the ability and capacity for the installations in Bromont, Quebec, to develop new capacity. Demand is on the rise, as is competition. Canada's investment in semiconductors, which will be up to $250 million, will make it possible to enhance the competitivity of the North American economy, create jobs for the middle class, and to draw on Canadian talent in addition to reducing pollution.
In addition to cutting pollution and fighting climate change, the President and I also worked on protecting more nature as well. Canada and the U.S. share the longest land border in the world. We share 3 oceans and the Great Lakes. The Great Lakes are a source of drinking water for 40 million people, and this shared resource needs to be protected. This is why Canada will make a major new investment of $420 million to continue safeguarding the Great Lakes for generations to come. Whether it's on protecting our shared waters, including in the Arctic, conserving biodiversity, or building strong net zero economies, Canada and the U.S. will continue to work together as partners. We'll also continue to work together as partners to keep our people safe. Keeping people safe also includes keeping asylum seekers safe, keeping our borders secure, and keeping our immigration system strong. Both of our countries believe in safe, fair, and orderly migration, refugee protection, and border security. This is why we will now apply the Safe Third Country Agreement to asylum seekers who cross between official points of entry. After midnight tonight, police and border officers will enforce the agreement and return irregular border crossers to the closest port of entry with the United States.
When the agreement comes into force, as of midnight tonight, border officers will return people crossing the border to the closest Canada-U.S. border crossing. Our teams have worked hard to achieve this agreement. All of the work will make it possible to deter irregular immigration at our borders, while at the same time we increase regular migration and immigration.
Safe is always our top priority. Last year I had the opportunity to visit NORAD personnel in Colorado. NORAD plays a central role in detecting, deterring, and defending against aerospace threats to our shared continent. NORAD has protected North America for over 60 years, and we're continuing our work to meet the evolving security challenges we face today. Canada is making major investments to modernize surveillance systems. And on top of that, we will invest to modernize and build new infrastructure to support the arrival of our 88 new F-35 fighter jets so that, most importantly, we can support our men and women in uniform who keep us safe. This bolsters Canada's defense abilities for the coming decades. Of course, protecting our countries also means continuing our work to make our borders more secure and keep people safe. The opioid overdose crisis is having devastating consequences in our communities. We're going to disrupt the cross-border movement of chemicals used in the illegal production of fentanyl. Canada and the United States will build a global coalition against synthetic drugs. We must stop the traffic of synthetic opioids while at the same time focusing on a public health response. If we want to keep Canadians and Americans safe at home, we have to continue defending our values around the world. Values like democracy, the rule of law, and respect for the international rules-based order. Today, we reaffirmed our steadfast support for the Ukrainian people as they defend themselves against Putin's brutal, barbaric invasion. On a aussi parlé d'autres endroits du monde qui vivent des moments difficiles, comme en Haïti. Comme je l'ai déjà dit, le
Difficulties like
Canada
Haiti.
veut garder le peuple
As I said,
au centre des solutions
Canada will
pour
keep
régler la
Haiti
crise.
in the heart of the solution for resolving this crisis. Today, I'm announcing that Canada will invest an additional $100 million to provide better police support to the National Police Force in Haiti. We will an elite who are benefiting from insecurity and violence. We are determined to increase international support for Haiti, including through humanitarian assistance. President Biden and I had very productive meetings. As I said a little earlier, our economic measures are also climate measures, security measures. The President recognizes the importance of acting on all of these fronts.
Last time we stood together in this very room, you were the outgoing Vice President, and we were embarking upon some challenging times in our relationship as a country, as two friends and countries. I have to say, through our conversations back then, through the work we've been able to do over these past 2 years, it has truly been an honor to be able to work with you for the benefit of Canadians and Americans, but also to continue to have a positive impact on the world in a very uncertain time. Your speech in Parliament a few minutes ago was filled with optimism grounded in a deep faith in people, in the character of the citizens we serve, and their ability to step up and meet the challenges before us. Like we have for many years, we will continue to work shoulder to shoulder as allies and friends to build a better future for Canadians and Americans alike. It is always a pleasure to stand beside you. It is always a pleasure to work with you. Right now, it's a pleasure to hand it over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. And I can't think of a challenge we haven't met together when we sought to do it together. Excuse me. Before I speak of the progress of this trip, I was informed by my national security team on the way over here that about an attack in Syria yesterday, and Iranian-backed militant groups used an unmanned aerial vehicle to strike one of our facilities, causing several American casualties. One of our citizens tragically died in that attack. And on the flight up yesterday, I spoke to our national security team and ordered an immediate response. Last night, U.S. military forces carried out a series of airstrikes in Syria, targeting those responsible for attacking our personnel. My heart and deepest condolences go out to the family of the American we lost and wish a speedy recovery for those who were wounded. But I'm also grateful for the professionalism of our service members who so ably carried out this response. And to make no mistake, the United States does not emphasize seek conflict with Iran, but be prepared for us to act forcefully, protect our people. That's exactly what happened last night. We're going to continue to keep up our efforts to counter terrorist threats in the region in partnerships with Canada and other members of the coalition to defeat ISIS. Now, let me get to today's business. It's wonderful to be back in Canada. I'm honored I had a chance to address Parliament this afternoon. They were very patient, and I appreciate it. And, you know, a little over 75 years ago, in his own address to Parliament, President Truman said, "No two nations are called upon to make great contributions to the world's rehabilitation." And, well, we are making great contributions to the world's rehabilitation, in my view. Today, as we stand at, as I said today, an inflection point in history, our nations are once again called upon to lead. And together, I believe, we're answering the call. First, we've unleashed an economic potential of our people and our partnership that generates more than $2.5 billion in trade every single day. Secondly, we're transforming our hemisphere into a clean energy powerhouse, including extending the Inflation Reduction Act tax credits to electric vehicles assembled in Canada. And as we discussed over the last 2 days, we're also strengthening our supply chains for critical minerals and semiconductors that power our everyday lives. And today, we're making a $50 million available through the Defense Production Act to incentivize more U.S. and Canadian companies to invest in packaging of these semiconductors and printed circuit boards. I also want to emphasize what I said earlier in Parliament, that Canada and the United States always will have each other's backs. And we see this through NORAD as we work to modernize the world's only, and emphasize it again, the only binational military command. There's none other in the world. And we see it through NATO, where we're ensuring that we can meet any threat. And over the last year, we've seen it through our strong and unified support for the brave people of Ukraine, to which the Prime Minister spoke so masterfully today in Parliament, and stepping into up to provide critical humanitarian aid as well as security assistance, and for Canada's embrace of Ukrainian refugees. And as we head into the second year of Russia's brutal invasion, our unity is not going to break. We're going to keep the pressure on Putin through our historic sanctions and tariffs, and we're going to continue to provide Ukraine with training, equipment, humanitarian assistance it needs, and to defend itself against Russian aggression. And finally, as we deepen the global cooperation, we're also exploring our regional collaboration. As we discussed today, we're doubling down on our work to disrupt synthetic drugs, which have claimed too many American and Canadian lives. By bolstering our work together in the North American Drug Dialogue with Mexico, and building on a new global coalition against synthetic opioids, we're working to get these killer drugs like fentanyl out of our communities. And together, under the Los Angeles Declaration on Migration and Protection, and the Prime Minister has already spoken, we're also making good on our commitment to address the historic levels of migration in our hemisphere. Since we created dedicated pathways in the United States, the number of migrants arriving on our southern border has dropped precipitously. And I commend Canada for stepping up with a similar program, opening new legal pathways for up to 15,000 migrants to come to Canada from countries in the Western Hemisphere. Mr. Prime Minister, Canada and the United States has always been partners in progress, and today we're once again called to lead. I know that the United States can count on Canada to be our friend, doing the hard work, doing the historic work, doing the work that matters, and doing it together. I truly believe we'll only make we're going to make.
For those
some
of you
great
watching in Atlantic Canada, your local news starts in just a moment. You can continue this live coverage for the rest of the country on CBC News Network. Thank you so much for watching.
And in consequence,
and if you're watching here on CBC News Network or CBC, I'm Rosemary Barton. You're watching the press conference with the President and the Prime Minister.
Prime Minister will be taking 2 questions from the American delegation, 2 questions from the Canadian delegation. 1 question, 1 follow-up. Mr. President, first question over to you.
All right. I guess the first person I'm calling on is Josh. Josh.
Thank you, Mr. President. 2 questions, 1 for each of you. Mr. President, you talked today about the security and economic partnership with Canada. President Xi just went to Russia and expanded China's economic commitment with that country. Why do you think many leading countries are choosing to form competing partnerships, and what does that mean for the world? Prime Minister Trudeau.
Oh, sorry.
Canada recently banned TikTok on government devices. Knowing what you know, are you comfortable with the idea of your children or family members using TikTok? Thank you.
I'll respond to the question first. Well, first of all, look, in 10 years, Russia and China have had 40 meetings. 40 meetings. And I disagree with the basic premise of your question. We have, significantly expanded our alliances. I haven't seen that happen with China and or Russia or anybody else in the world. We're in a situation in the United States where NATO is stronger. We're all together. The G7, the Quad, the ASEAN, Japan and Korea. I have, my staff pointed out to me, I have now met with 80% of the world leaders just since I've been president. We're the ones expanding the alliances. The opposition is not. Name for me where that's going. And tell me what I don't mean literally that, but rhetorically. Tell me how, in fact, you see a circumstance where China has made some significant commitment to Russia. And what commitment can they make? Economically. Pardon me?
Their trade has increased, sir.
Yeah, their trade has increased compared to what? Look, I don't take China lightly. I don't take Russia lightly. But I think we vastly exaggerate. I've been hearing now for the past 3 months about China is going to provide significant weapons to Russia, and they're going to. Well, I've been talking about that. They haven't yet. Doesn't mean they won't, but they haven't yet. And if anything's happened, the West has coalesced significantly more. How about the Quad? How about Japan and the United States and South Korea? How about what we've done in terms of AUKUS? How about so I just want to put it in perspective. I don't take it lightly what China, and Russia are doing. And it could get significantly worse. But let's put it in perspective. We are uniting coalitions. We, the United States and Canada.
On TikTok, we made a similar decision to the American government and others when we said that we do not feel that the security profile is safe for government-issued phones. There are concerns around privacy and security, and that is why we have banned TikTok from government-issued phones. But your question, Josh, was about what I do as a parent of teenagers and my kids on social media. And on that, on that. I am obviously concerned with their privacy and their security, which is why I'm glad that on their phones that happen to be issued by the government, they no longer access TikTok. That was a big frustration for them. Really, this applies to us too, Dad? Yes, I just did that. But I think as parents, we are understanding, particularly of teenagers, just how much of our kids' lives are lived online and how much they are impacted, not just by influence the way their friends are and peer pressure that all of us went through as teenagers, but a degree of misinformation, disinformation, and malicious activity that is allowed for by incredible advances in technology that we are benefiting from in so many different ways. As governments, we have to make sure we're doing what we can to keep people safe in the public square, making sure we're pushing back against hate speech and incitations to violence online, and we're carefully calibrating legislation to do that. As a parent, I spend a lot of time talking to my kids about what's online and how they should try and go outside and play a little more sports and not get so wrapped up in their phones. And we're going to continue to do that. Our concerns around TikTok are around security and access to information that the Chinese government could have to government phones. It's just a personal side benefit that my kids can't use TikTok anymore that I recommend everyone to use my encouragement to try and do.
Merci. On va prendre maintenant la question canadienne. Christian Noël de Radio-Canada.
We'll now go to a Canadian question. Christian Noël.
Monsieur Trudeau, bonjour.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Mr. Prime Minister. I'd like to ask a question about Roxham Road. The agreement has been ready for a year. Why did you wait so long? And for the 15,000 migrants that Canada will welcome, why so few? What have we offered to the U.S. in exchange? Thank you, Christian. We've known for a long time, theoretically, what modernization needed to be made to the Roxham Road, to the agreement. We couldn't simply shut down Roxham Road and hope that everything would resolve itself, because we would have had problems. The border is very long. People would have looked for other places to cross. And so that's why we chose to modernize the Safe Third Country Agreement, so that someone who attempts to cross between official crossings will be subject to the principle, the same principle as someone who should seek asylum in the first safe country they arrive at. Now, for people who are coming from the U.S., that is where they should be asylum seekers. Using this means of uniformly applying the agreement, which we knew theoretically would be the solution, but it takes complex processes to manage the border. It took months before we could move forward with the announcement. But by doing so, we protected the integrity of the system, and we're also continuing to live up to our obligations with respect to asylum seekers. At the same time, we continue to be open to regular migrants, and we will increase the number of asylum seekers who we accept from the hemisphere, the Western Hemisphere, in order to compensate for closing these irregular crossings. Thank you.
Mr. President, this question is for you, but Monsieur Trudeau, sentez-vous bien libre de répondre aussi.
Please feel free, Mr. Trudeau, to answer as well.
Monsieur le Président, êtes-vous déçu que le Canada...
Are you disappointed that Canada is not part or hasn't taken a bigger role in the multilateral forces in Haiti, and what would you like Canada to do more in addition to the $100 million announced today?
Well, no, I'm not disappointed. Look, this is a very, very difficult circumstance. The idea of how do we deal with what's going on in Haiti, where gangs have essentially taken the place of the government, in effect. they rule the roost, as the saying goes. And so I think that what the Prime Minister has spoken about makes a lot of sense. The biggest thing we could do, and it's going to take time, is to increase the prospect of the police departments in Haiti having the capacity to deal with the problems they're faced. And that is going to take a little bit of time. We also are looking at whether or not the international community through the United Nations could play a larger role in this event, in this circumstance. But there is no question that there is a real, genuine concern, because there are several million people in Haiti, and the diaspora could cause some real, how can I say it, confusion in the Western Hemisphere. And so, but I think that what the Prime Minister is suggesting, and we are as well going to be contributing, to see if we can both increase the efficiency and capacity of the training and the methods used by the police department, as well as seeing if we can engage other people in the hemisphere, which we've been talking to, and they're prepared to do some. So it's a work in progress.
For 30 years, Western countries have been involved in Haiti to try to stabilize the country, to try to help the Pearl of the Antilles, and the situation is atrocious. It's affecting the security of the people of Haiti. We must take action, and we must keep the Haitian people in the approach that we build for security. And that's why the approach that we are working on with the U.S. involves strengthening the capacity of the Haitian National Police, bringing more peace and security and stability. This won't happen tomorrow. It will, of course, be a long process, but we will be there to support the capacity of the police in Haiti, the national police. At the same time, part of the insecurity and instability in Haiti is because of the Haitian elite, who have for too long benefited from the misery of the Haitian people. They work for their own political gain, their own personal gain, and this has prevented the country from recovering, and that's why we're proceeding with sanctions. We will continue to bring pressure to bear on the elite, the political class in Haiti, to hold them accountable for the distress facing the Haitian people, but to hold them accountable for ensuring their well-being. We're going to continue to work together. We fully understand how important this task is.
Mr. President, over to you.
Can I follow up with one point on Haiti? And that is that any decision about military force, which it's often raised, we think would have to be done in consultation with the United Nations and with the Haitian government. And so that is not off the table, but that is not in play at the moment. I'm sorry.
Over to you for the question, Mr. President.
Jordan, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. President. Some on Wall Street have expressed frustration that it's unclear what more your administration is willing to do to resolve the banking crisis. The markets have remained in turmoil. So how confident are you that the problem is contained? And if it spreads, what measures, such as guaranteeing more deposits, are you willing or not willing to take?
First of all, have you ever known Wall Street not in consternation? Number one. Look, I think we've done a pretty damn good job. People's savings are secure, and even those beyond the $250,000, the FDIC is guaranteeing them. The American taxpayer is not going to have to pay a penny. The banks are in pretty good shape. What's going on in Europe isn't a direct consequence of what's happening in the United States. And what we would do is, if we find that there's more instability than appears, we'd be in a position to have the FDIC use the power it has to guarantee those loans above 250, like they did already. And so I think it's going to take a little while for things to just calm down. But I don't see anything that's on the horizon that's about to explode. But I do understand there's an unease about this. And these mid-sized banks have to be able to survive. And I think they'll be able to do that.
And Mr. Prime Minister, the U.S. has included Canada in electric vehicle subsidies, as you've discussed, that were included in the Inflation Reduction Act. But the IRA also raises some competitiveness concerns and challenges for Canada. President Biden supports Buy American provisions very strongly, and that has historically led to some trade tensions. So are you planning to announce anything in your budget to keep up, so to speak, and are you asking the U.S. government for exceptions to the Buy American provisions in other areas?
First of all, there's nothing new about Canada having to make sure that we remain competitive with the United States as a place for investment. That's something that we have long known as a friendly competition between us that has led to tremendous growth and benefits in both of our countries. Right now, we're in a time where Joe talked about it as an inflection point. I think that's exactly right. We can feel the global economy shifting in very real ways towards lower carbon emission technologies, cleaner tech, great jobs in the natural resource and manufacturing industries that are going to be increased on our continent after years of outsourcing and offshoring. There is a real opportunity for both of us, and the IRA, which is bringing in massive investments and massive opportunities for American workers and companies, is also going to have strong impacts on supply chains and producers and employees in Canada. Yes, we're going to have to make sure we're staying competitive and targeting the areas where we think we can best compete, and we'll have more to say about that in our budget next week. But let us take a moment to step back and see that North America, Canada and the United States in particular, are incredibly well positioned to be the purveyors of solutions and economic growth that the net zero economy around the world will need over the coming decades. The innovation, the know-how, the ability of us to make big things together leave us in a time of global uncertainty, extremely certain that we are well placed for the future. Whether it's investments that have seen Canada go from 5th or 6th in the world in terms of battery supply chains to now 2nd in the world in terms of battery supply chains. Whether it's continuing our leadership on the cleanest aluminum in the world, moving towards cleaner steel and zero-emission steel, whether it's moving forward on critical minerals that the world is understanding they can no longer rely on places like China or Russia for, that they can rely on Canada to be not just a purveyor of ores, but of finished materials that will be built in environmentally responsible, union or good middle-class jobs, wages, strong communities, and the kind of leadership that the world is increasingly looking for. There's long been a bit of a weakness, I think, to our argument that we've made over the past decades as Western democracies that says that our model is the best one, it leads to the most prosperity, but so much of our model, we sort of turned our back to the fact that it relied on cheap imports of goods or resources from parts of the world that didn't share our values and weren't responsible on the environment or on human rights or on labor standards. And what we're doing right now is showing that we can and will build resilient supply chains between us and with friends around the world that adhere every step of the way to the values that we live by, that make sure that there are good jobs for workers in communities, urban and rural, right across our continent. There are good careers for kids long into the future, not in spite of a changing world, but because of that changing world, and how well we are positioned to see the future and meet the future. That's why it's so exciting to be able to work alongside Joe in these challenging times, where we know we are better positioned than just about anyone else, and those friends of ours who share our values and our democracies around the world will benefit from the strength and the relations they have with us, and those who choose to continue to turn their backs on the environment, on human rights, on the values of freedom and dignity for all, will increasingly not be able to benefit from the growth that our societies, that our communities are creating every single day.
And by the way, we each have with the other needs. We each have with other needs. The idea that somehow Canada is somehow put at a disadvantage because we're going to probably be investing billions of dollars in their ability to package what is coming out of the semiconductor area. I don't get it. How's that in any way do anything other than hire and bring billions of dollars into Canada? I also don't understand how, when we talk about it, we greatly need Canada in terms of the minerals that are needed. Well, you guys, we don't have the minerals to mine. You can mine them. You don't want to produce, turn them into product. We do. I mean, I'm a little confused, at least thus far, on why this is a disadvantage for Canada and the United States. I think we each have what the other needs. And let me conclude by saying, when I started talking about we're going to build our economies from the middle out and the bottom up, not the top down, I was being literal. Because what happened is, if you think about it, in Democrat and Republican administrations beginning over 30 years ago or more in the United States, corporate America decided that they're going to do is they're going to export jobs and import product because there's cheaper labor. Well, guess what? Now we are making sure they import jobs here, and we export product. Canada's doing the same thing. So this is a real shift in the world economy in terms of what we're prepared to do. And I'll be darned if I'm going to stick in a situation where, as long as I'm president, where we have to rely on a supply chain in the other end of the world that is affected by politics, pandemics, or anything else. We're not hurting anyone in terms of having access to the start of the supply chain. It's available. But again, I predict to you, you're going to see, after we're both out of office, both China out of the game in terms of many of the product they're producing, and the United States and Canada pretty solid economically situated for the future in terms of also bringing back manufacturing jobs.
Merci.
Sorry. And they're telling me I'm talking too long because we got to go to dinner.
Thank you. On va prendre maintenant dernière question.
We'll take one last question.
My first question is for the Prime Minister, but Mr. President, feel free to weigh in before my follow-up. Prime Minister, we know that you've appointed a special rapporteur, but with what we've learned about Han Dong's communication with the Chinese Consular General, do you believe he advocated for the delayed release of the two Michaels?
First of all, Han gave a strong speech in the House that I recommend people listen to, and we fully accept that he is stepping away from the Liberal caucus in order to vigorously contest these allegations. But I do want to take a step back and point out that foreign interference by authoritarian governments like China, Russia, Iran, and others is a very real challenge to our democracies and is absolutely unacceptable. It's why over the past number of years, the President and I have had many conversations about this, and indeed, we'll continue to work together with our democratic allies around the world to keep our institutions and our democracies safe from foreign interference. In 2018, when Canada hosted the G7 in Charlevoix, we actually created the G7 Rapid Response Mechanism to protect our democracies in cases of interference. And we will continue to work together to make sure we're doing everything necessary to protect our democracies, which by definition are more open and therefore more vulnerable to foreign actors trying to weigh in our politics, in our business, in our research institutions, and particularly impact on citizens themselves, which is why over the past years, Canada, like our allies around the world, has given itself new, rigorous tools to counter foreign interference. And with the work that our expert rapporteur will do, with the work that our National Security Committee of Parliamentarians will be doing, and other institutions, we will continue to do everything necessary to keep Canadians safe.
Nothing to add.
Thank you. And Mr. President, when you took office, you canceled the Keystone XL pipeline. This week, your government delayed the environmental assessment to reroute Enbridge Line 5, and at the same time, you're approving oil drilling in Alaska. So what's your response to people who say it's hypocritical to stymie Canadian energy projects while allowing your own?
First of all, I don't think it is, but I'll be very brief. The difficult decision was on what we do with the Willow project in Alaska. And my strong inclination was to disapprove of it across the board. But the advice I got from counsel was that if that were the case, I may very well lose in court and lose that case in court to the oil company, and then not be able to do what I really want to do beyond that, and that is conserve significant amounts of Alaskan sea and land forever. I was able to see to it that we literally able to conserve millions of acres, not a few, millions of acres of sea and land forever, so it cannot be used in the future. I am banking on, we'll find out, that the oil company is going to say that's not going to be challenged, and they're going to go with 3 sites. And the energy that is going to be produced there, estimated, would account to 1% of the total production of oil in the world. And so I thought it was the better gamble and a hell of a trade-off to have the Arctic Ocean, the Bering Sea, and so many other places off limits forever now. I think we put more land in conservation than any administration since Teddy Roosevelt. I'm not positive of that, but I think that's true.
Thank you all. This is what concludes today's press conference. C'est ce qui mène faire la conférence de presse d'aujourd'hui.
Thank you.
Okay, and that is the end of the official press conference by President Biden and Prime Minister Trudeau. They will now make their way to the gala dinner after what I think the government would view, anyway, to be a successful visit by the president, taking 4 questions on a series of topics before we hand things over to the host of Power and Politics, David Cochrane, because Power and Politics will follow in just a few short moments. Let's bring in David Cochrane, who's been watching along with us. David, just tell me what you made of some of their answers there.
I think a key answer there was on the question about Haiti, where when Joe Biden was asked if he was disappointed that Canada has failed to meet U.S. Ongoing demands to step up and lead some sort of an intervention security force there. And he said, no, he was not disappointed, talked about the need to help the police. And the Prime Minister then in his answer talked about that helping the Haitian police deal with this overwhelming gang problem, in particular in the capital of Port-au-Prince, is an urgent priority. And then the president coming back saying they're working now with the United Nations and the international community. Military option is not off the table, he said, but it's not really on the table. I think on this persisting question of what was Canada going to do about Haiti in terms of its relation with pressure from the United States to do something, this lets a lot of air out of that particular balloon. This is now two face-to-face meetings in Mexico City and Ottawa where this has been discussed and where Canada has not budged. The Chief of Defence Staff, of course, Wayne Eyre, saying Canada may not have the capacity. The concern in the government is once you go in, how do you get out and what does success look like? The U.S. efforts to get Canada to take that on appear to have been met with firm resistance from Justin Trudeau. And today, Joe Biden kind of let him off the hook to a degree by saying he was not disappointed in the lack of that commitment today, getting $100 million to help with policing issues.
Yeah, also saying that they would engage with other countries in the hemisphere. Right. They have been speaking to Brazil, so perhaps there'll be some movement from that point of view. There was a question about foreign interference, as we expected there, David. Prime Minister not really saying much more than what he said in the past.
No, and he was asked a direct question by Dylan Robertson there from the Canadian Press. Do you believe Han Dong asked the Canadian diplomats to extend the detention of Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig? And he kind of didn't answer it. We do know from the Globe and Mail's reporting, and you and I have heard similar things from various sources, that the government has reviewed the transcript of that particular conversation and determined that it wasn't an actionable intelligence brief that the Prime Minister. But he didn't answer that. I mean, there are challenges around this because of the Security of Information Act, and he's limited in what he can really talk about. But a simple question of, do you believe Han Dong did what he's being accused of, went unanswered. And to be asked again and again and again.
And the president didn't go near that question with a 10-foot pole. David Cochrane, thank you so much for all your special coverage here on our special coverage. Power and Politics starts in just moments. Thank you for watching our live coverage of the U.S. President Joe Biden's visit to Canada. More with Power and Politics and David Cochrane on CBC News Network next. Thank you for watching.
We now join the following program already in progress. The following CBC original program is available with described video.